Starstruck, Part 1. Chapter 1. The Throne. Eliyahu stood gazing at his father's throne. The sound of arguing and shouts of confusion surrounded him, but his eyes remained locked, fixed on the glory and majesty of that heavenly seat. Even in their current situation, he could not grasp how anyone could do any differently. The radiant throne gleamed like precious jewels beneath a shimmering emerald rainbow, and the air around him vibrated with the holy light that pulsed through this sacred space. A war had just ended, a war that decimated all of creation. Stars had exploded, planets left to wander at the vastness of space. The war swept through the heavens like a cleansing fire, leaving behind piles of shattered light and ruins of a once perfect order. Gravitational fields trembled, nebulae crawled through the void, their gaseous bodies trailing memories of what once was. Rings of debris, asteroids, fragments of angelic armor floated aimlessly through space. All of it was over now, but the damage was everywhere. The boundaries that fenced in the ordered realms had been cracked, and nothing felt whole. Eliyahu remembered the first wave of wounded. It was chaos. A constant stream of injuries coming in at a pace faster than their little team of medics could handle. Learning to heal was something they never thought would be necessary. Being a celestial, he did not engage in combat. He was not strong enough, but could still help his brothers and sisters. The war went on for years, but was finally over. The enemy had been defeated, but at what cost? A third of their number had rebelled, many he had known, many he had considered friends. The loss was severe. What would become of them? The council had gathered to petition their father. The fate of the fallen had yet to be made known. Some wanted judgment, some forgiveness. Nothing like this had ever happened. There was no precedent. One of the elders shouted for silence, but no one seemed to notice. They needed to hear from their father. They needed direction. Then, in an instant, all was silent. A blinding light surrounded them, and the weight fell upon them. Every angel, celestial being, and heavenly creature fell to their knees, and the presence of their Father rested on his throne. A feeling of trepidation washed over the room. Then he spoke.
"My sons and daughters, we have suffered great loss. The war is over, and those involved in the rebellion will face judgment. But there is hope. All will be set right. I will create a new race, made in my image, and I will renew creation and give them dominion to rule over it." As he spoke, his light pulsed throughout the throne room. Their father was made of pure love. He was holy, and all his children loved and feared him. A seraphim drifted in front of Eliyahu, blocking his view. He needed to find a better place to stand, but the crowd was thick, and he had difficulty as he weaved through, looking for a less populated area. Why did angels have to be so tall? He pressed through and, ducking under a wing, found an opening. Just as he turned to face the throne, he heard his name. "Eliyahu, my son. Hope, my daughter. Please step forward."
Eliyahu's heart stopped. Did the father just say his name? Faces in the crowd started to turn his direction, answering his question. It must be him. But why? He had never been summoned before the throne. There were protocols, layers of intermediaries, traditions as old as time itself. None of them had ever required his presence so near to the seat of absolute authority. He felt a chill. Obedience was instinctive, but his feet did not want to move. There were too many eyes, centuries of expectation pressing down on him. He imagined just one mistake would be witnessed and remembered forever. He looked up, searching for direction. The crowd had parted slightly, but the host pressed in on either side, silent and unmoving like a canyon of faces. His brothers and sisters watched with unreadable expressions, some curious, some pitying. Eliyahu did not know what to make of their stares. He threaded his way forward, almost tripping on the hem of a robe. A seraphim's wing brushed his cheek, startling him. The throne room was vast but intimate. Every echo carried, and the only sound left was the sound of his own footsteps. The throne itself pulsed with color, not one hue but every hue. The emerald rainbow above cast shadows that moved in ways that defied geometry. As he stepped out from the crowd, a ripple in the glassy floor caught his eye. He saw another celestial, presumably Hope, squeezing through two large angels, then stepped out onto the sea of glass. She was slender, brown-haired, and radiant. Her approach was less hesitant than his, but Eliyahu could see the nervous flicker beneath her composure. Her arms held rigid to her sides, her steps too measured. She caught his gaze as they drew abreast of each other, and in that glance, he saw that she was afraid too. Relief washed through him. He smiled, just barely, and she managed the same. Together, they moved toward the foot of the throne. 7 torches burned in a straight line before it, flames so white they could not be looked at. The air in this space was thick and ionized. He stopped, uncertain of how close was close enough, but the sensation of being watched resolved the issue for him. They both knelt, and the world receded. There was only the throne, and them, and the unblinking presence that saturated every cubic inch. The father did not speak immediately. Instead, the rainbow above seemed to turn inside out. Planes of color folded and refolded, and in the silence, Eliyahu felt his every secret measured and laid bare. He was aware, distantly, of other figures in the room, the elders who stood as witnesses, the rank upon rank of those whose loyalty had never wavered. But for now, none of that mattered. There was only what the father would say next, and how they would respond. Hope looked up first, and Eliyahu marveled at her courage, or her innocence. He followed her lead, lifting his gaze just high enough to meet the lowest edge of the throne. Then Father spoke.
My son, my daughter, I have chosen you for a special assignment. I am about to reform my creation and repair the damage the enemy has done. Everything will be made new. New planets, new stars, new galaxies, and universes. Father paused as a sense of wonder filled the throne room. Eliyahu, Hope, you will be my explorers. I need you to explore it all and record what you see in this scroll. An ornate golden scroll appeared just before them, refracted light dotting the ground around it. The father continued to speak. Eliyahu, your sister will be our scribe, and you will be her protector. Your journey will take many years, and you will have no companions but each other, so I want to give you a gift. This gift will be your most prized possession, a gift unlike any I have given to any celestial. This gift is love. And don't forget, I will be with you. If you need anything, all you have to do is ask. The following silence seemed to be a dismissal, and they both stood, then bowed and slowly backed up and turned to leave. Eliyahu glanced at Hope, then froze. She was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. She was standing facing him. She smiled, and his heart nearly stopped. Immediately they embraced. It was as if time itself had ceased and all creation had faded away, leaving them alone with the love that they shared. A faint warmth pulsed between them, like a light just beyond sight, binding their spirits in a way he could not yet understand. It was the warmest, most complete feeling that he had ever experienced. Nothing else mattered except this love, and he never wanted it to end. For the first time in his life, he was completely content, and he knew that he could live there for eternity in her arms. But after a moment, the sudden realization of where they were startled them from that dream. Quickly, they released each other, and both blushed with embarrassment. But the father laughed, and his love and joy filled the throne room. The crowds cheered and joined in the laughter, which only increased their embarrassment. They knelt once more and thanked their father and hastily made their way back to their places. Eliyahu paced his room. Hope was supposed to meet him there to go over their strategy, but she was late. He pulled out a chair and sat at a small table in the corner of his room. The celestial palace was large and housed most of his race.
It was comprised of 24 towers that soared into the sky, each tower having its own kitchens, community spaces, concert halls, dining, and recreation areas, and everything a celestial could require. Within the confines of a single tower, one could live for centuries, fully satisfied without ever needing to leave. His room, however, was quite small, but he felt blessed that he at least had an outer room with a window, even though most of his view was blocked by the nearest tower. He looked down and absently picked at a loose splinter protruding from the edge of his wooden table. He could not stop thinking about her. What did Father do to him? Did she feel the same? It had been days since they had last spoken. Father was already on day 3 of creation, and most of the celestial palace had emptied out to watch. Eliyahu had gone to the first 2 days, but found it hard to concentrate. He felt anxious. Today was supposed to be vegetation, and he never had much interest in plants. On the first 2 days, he had looked for Hope. He had spotted her once on the first day, but she was talking to a large cherubim and didn't want to interrupt. He knew that they would be spending thousands of years together and wanted to give her some space. Eliyahu heard footsteps coming down the corridor and quickly stood and faced his door. Hope entered the room.
"Sorry I'm late. I was talking to some of my friends. Father went all out today. What did you think of those trees?"
The mention of friends made Eliyahu wince. "I love trees," he said awkwardly. It wasn't really a lie. Even though plants weren't his favorite thing, trees were probably one of the more acceptable types of vegetation. "Wow, you have a window!" Hope beamed and crossed the room to peer out. "What a great view!" Yeah, he gritted his teeth. Why couldn't he think of anything to say? It's like his mind gave up and emptied all his thoughts out onto the floor. "Do you want to sit?" He pulled out the single chair facing the corner of the room. Hope looked at the chair, then at him, and smiled. "I'm okay," she said, then walked over to him. She was standing very close, looking up at him expectantly. "Are you going to greet me?" Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. Yes," he replied stiffly, then put his arms around her. It happened again. Peace. All the fear, doubt, anxiety drained from him and was replaced by pure contentment. He closed his eyes and basked in the moment. "Wow," he whispered, then pulled away to look into her eyes. "What do you think this is?" Hope had tears in her eyes. "It's Father." Eliyahu looked quizzical. "So, is this what he meant when he said he would give us a gift?" Hope pondered this. "I think he gave us himself as a gift." Eliyahu considered this, then frowned. "How could Father give us himself as a gift?" "We should be careful talking like that. We are fathers, not the other way around. But let's get to work. Do you have the scroll?" Hope, looking shamed, took off a pendant necklace and placed it on the table. The gold that cased a large emerald started to liquefy and grow, swirling and transforming, and within moments formed a golden scroll crested with gems. "That's amazing!" Eliyahu exclaimed. "Yeah, I was playing with it all night." Hope laughed and her spirits lifted. "Watch this!" Hope pushed a button at the end of the umbilicus and a small writing utensil popped out. She smiled and pointed it at Eliyahu threateningly. "Surrender," she said playfully. Eliyahu chuckled as Hope unrolled a portion of the scroll across the small table and pointed to a small dot in the center. "This is Earth, the planet where Father is creating that new race." She touched the dot with the tip of her finger and the image expanded, revealing other planets near it circling a star. She moved her finger across the smooth surface and the planets and stars followed, revealing more as new solar systems emerged on the opposite side. "There are millions and millions of planets to explore. It's going to take us a long time." Eliyahu nodded in agreement. "I am excited to get started." Hope looked at him and smiled. Eliyahu pointed to the small black dot. "I think that we should start near Earth and work in a spiral formation, cataloging each planet and star as we go. We will keep working our way out until we get to the edge of space, if there is an edge. Father said it will take 6 days to reform creation. Then on the 7th day, there will be a banquet, and we are supposed to leave after that." Eliyahu started. I just realized, how do we get from place to place? We can't fly. Hope furrowed her brow. I haven't tried it yet, but I think we use the scroll. We just hold our finger to the planet and zip! We are there! She looked at Eliyahu and beamed. Her smile was so contagious he couldn't help but smile back.
It's getting late. We should get some rest. He didn't want her to go. But when would he? It was 4 days until their planned departure. He knew those days would be the longest he would ever face. But what is 4 days compared to an eternity? His life would never be the same. Eliyahu took Hope's hands and looked into her eyes. He knew it would take eons to explore all of creation, and he would get to do it with her. He could not believe this was happening. His father had given him a blessing that he could never have thought was possible. I could explore those eyes for eons, Eliyahu whispered, then turned a deep shade of red as he realized he had just said that out loud. But Hope only winked, squeezed his hands, then turned and walked out his open door. The next 4 days passed very slowly for Eliyahu. All of Father's children watched in amazement as Father reformed his creation. He chose to avoid the crowds. He had a lot of thinking to do. He loved Father, but why a new race? Father doesn't make mistakes. Creating a new race seems like he was trying to compensate for a failure. He laid back on his bed and stared at the ceiling. The banquet was today, and he could not wait to see Hope. I know I am just a celestial, and I have no idea what Father is doing. His ways are not our ways, as he says. It just doesn't seem necessary. The rebels were cast down, and everyone left is loyal to him. Why do we need something new? Aren't we enough for him? He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. I guess it doesn't really matter. I won't be here anyway. He smiled. It's going to be amazing. A short, dark-haired celestial knocked twice on the molding of his doorway and entered. He smiled genially and announced, "Delivery for Eliyahu! It's your banquet robes!" Eliyahu sat up and looked at what the young celestial was carrying. With a flick of his wrist, the celestial shook out the folded garment. It was a pure white robe adorned with golden embroidery. Eliyahu stood. "Thank you. Could you put it over there?" He pointed to his chair in the corner. The young celestial looked at the chair and winced. He glanced around the room for a better place to hang the garment, but found none. He walked over to the chair and gingerly laid the robe over the back. He nodded at Eliyahu, then left without a word. He walked over and bent to inspect the fine embroidery. It was like nothing he had ever seen. The entire robe was covered in depictions of Father's latest work. He noticed a planet surrounded by a water canopy. He had been there that day. Father had swept them up and brought them by spirit to witness it firsthand. All Father's children were right there. He remembered the sound of the water lifting, great globs the size of palaces being pulled up from the deep and floating upward, excess water running off the sides like great waterfalls. They continued upward until they could no longer be seen. He recalled the salty taste and smell of the ocean and the wind that arose from the colossal displacement of air by those great masses of water. He looked at another depiction. Great trees the size of mountains with branches that stretched to shade entire forests. He imagined himself standing beside Hope, watching this tree sprout and grow, stretching to the heavens. His lip trembled. Why hadn't he gone? He would never get that back. He wiped his face and resolved not to let self-doubt steal any more precious memories. Dressed in his new robe, Eliyahu looked around his room for the last time. He had never bothered to decorate. Except his bed, table, and chair and a cold fireplace, it was barren. He walked over to the fireplace and picked up the poker lying on the floor and rested it standing against the wall. He would probably never see this room again. He didn't know why, but it made him sad. He walked to his door, paused, then stepped out. Chapter 2. The Banquet. Eliyahu entered the banquet hall. It was alive with laughter and excited conversations. Eliyahu passed a group of celestials talking about the day Father created animals. "Did you see those horses?" one of them asked. "Those were the most majestic creatures I have ever seen." His expression was awestruck as he gestured fervently with his hands. "I wonder if we can ride them," another responded. Eliyahu, still feeling regretful that he had skipped out on the last 4 days, avoided engaging in any conversation. Not that there were many people he would normally engage with. He didn't consider himself antisocial by any means. I mean, he had just spoken to the celestial that delivered his robe, and he talks to Hope. He just doesn't go out of his way to bother people when they're talking. It's just being polite. But at any rate, he needed to focus on finding Hope. The banquet hall was enormous and much longer than it was wide. 7 large tables ran parallel the entire length, and the farthest end was not visible due to the distance, as well as the semi-opaque white light that hovered in the air. "There is no way I am going to find her here," he said to himself. A voice boomed.
Find who?
He spun around to confront the source. It was an unusually large cherubim. His ox face was facing him. That always made him unsettled, but was nowhere near as bad as their lion face. Hope?" Eliyahu said nervously. The cherubim pointed toward a fountain flowing with an amber liquid.
She's over there.
His voice was gruff and commanding.
You be nice to her. She's one of my favorite celestials.
Yes, sir." Eliyahu nodded in consent, then quickly turned in the direction of the fountain. Hope was standing talking to 2 other celestials. He recognized one, but didn't know their names. "Eliyahu!" Hope exclaimed, and threw her arms around him. Peace filled him. "That will never get old," he laughed. Hope tried to hide a smile and gestured to the 2 celestials standing beside her. "Meet my friends. This is Braca and Naomi." Braca, a celestial with long braided golden hair, raised her hand in a gesture of greeting, but stared at Eliyahu in a scrutinizing manner. Naomi grinned and said, "Hello, Eliyahu. We have heard a lot about you." Braca rolled her eyes, and Hope made a threatening face at Naomi. Eliyahu felt heat rising to his cheeks. She had been talking about him? What does that mean? Worst-case scenarios started to run through his head. Was she resentful that she is being sent off with me? Her friend Braca certainly isn't happy. Eliyahu looked at the amber liquid bubbling up from the fountain. "What's this stuff?" He tried to change the topic of conversation. Hope picked up an empty glass from a tray on a pedestal beside the fountain. "It's champagne," she said as she dipped the glass into the bubbling pool, filled it, and handed it to him. "Try some." Celestials did not need to eat, however some found pleasure in it. He had seldom tasted the various dishes and beverages available at banquets, and had never stepped foot in the kitchens or dining halls. He lifted the glass and took a small sip of the sweet fluid. That's not bad," he forced a smile. A seraphim called out over the bustle of the crowded dining hall for everyone to take their seats. Hope and Eliyahu bid farewell to the 2 celestials and headed toward the table. "Do you have your seat number?" Hope asked. "Seat number?" Panic struck him. Who told you your seat number?" Hope smiled, reached across him, and pulled a small golden card from his robe pocket. She looked at it and said, "You're next to me." Eliyahu sighed in relief. "We should be right down here." "Yes, here we are." Hope pulled out her chair and sat. Eliyahu noticed a similar golden card folded and sitting on an empty plate. He checked his number and sat down next to Hope. "Hey, I've been wanting to talk to you about something," Hope said, looking unusually serious. Eliyahu steeled himself. "Of course. What is it?" Hope hesitated but continued, measuring each word. "You know that feeling we get when we embrace?" She paused and Eliyahu nodded slowly. "Well," she continued, "I figured something out. Close your eyes." Eliyahu took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He felt slightly awkward but would do anything for her, even if it meant looking asleep at his seat just as the banquet was about to start. "Now, picture me. Got it?" Eliyahu nodded. "Now, let go. Like you're sinking into a quiet dream, letting my face blur into light. What do you see?" Eliyahu knit his brow, his mind easing into a calm, vast stillness. Just you blurry, I guess." Hope huffed. "Okay, let me show you." She closed her eyes, eyebrows slightly raised. He watched her for a moment. Her breath was slow and steady. She was so beautiful. "Thank you," she said, but her mouth did not move. Was he hearing things? "No, you're not hearing things." That amazing peace filled his heart, steadying him, surrounding him, enveloping him. He closed his eyes. He saw a blue light floating in a landscape of darkness. He closed his eyes tighter. "Is that you?" he thought. "Yes, that's me." The blue light was like a shimmering orb, swirling with shades of teal and aquamarine. "Wow, you really are beautiful. Do I look like that?" He could feel her smile. "I don't know what I look like, only what you look like." Eliyahu studied her closely. "You're a beautiful light, shining and pulsing with different shades of blue." He felt joy burst from her. "Blue's my favorite." "What color am I?" Eliyahu asked. "You're mostly clear with iridescent ripples. Sometimes you have more green, sometimes more purple. Right now you have a lot of blue." This comment made Eliyahu wonder how many times she had seen him like this, but the thought excited him. His body sat still, fixed in the banquet chair, yet his light drew nearer to her, her blue glow enlarging in his field of view. He sensed her motion, her light gliding closer to his. She got so close that all he could see was her, then her blue hues started to pulse with iridescent ripples. They had bonded, their lights weaved together like colors bleeding into a shared canvas. A tide of emotions surged between them, her radiant joy, his quiet awe, her nervous flutter, his steady warmth blending into a single, vibrant pulse. Her thoughts became his thoughts, and his thoughts became her thoughts. They knew each other thoroughly and completely. The love that bound them was something tangible, something outside themselves. It was the most powerful thing he had ever felt, more powerful even than the weight. He immediately felt shame, comparing this to father. A loud scraping sound startled him, and he opened his eyes. "Sorry," a seraphim said as he pulled out his chair and sat down next to Eliyahu. The chairs in the great hall had started to fill up, and the low murmur of quiet conversations filled the space. A line of celestials pushing carts filled with trays of food entered through a door across from him. He could not make out what was being served from this distance, but if it was anything like previous banquets, they would start with some sort of fruit. Hope trailed her finger across the embroidery on his right forearm. "Did you notice that all our robes are unique? This one is really neat. I wonder what it means." Eliyahu looked down and inspected the depiction. It looked like a celestial lying on the earth with an orb floating above his chest. This orb. It's like what we see." "Yeah," Hope replied. "Look at this one. It's my favorite." She pointed to a giant whale leaping out of the waves, stretching from her collarbone to her waist. Great waves engulfed it, spraying droplets of water suspended in the air around it. If you stared long enough, it almost seemed to move. A celestial reached between them, excusing herself, and placed a tray of fruit on the table in front of them. Hope smiled and thanked her, and picked up a slice of pear and offered it to Eliyahu. He looked into her eyes. They were innocent and pure, nothing like him. Because of the moment that they had shared, he knew who she was, and her eyes reflected that. He felt unworthy of her. He knew that she must have seen him, just as he had seen her, but she did not seem repulsed. She must have seen his fear, his doubt, and his resentment. So why was she acting like nothing had happened? Being in her mind was a life-changing experience. She was everything that he was not, everything that he wanted to be. It should have been inspiring, but it only made him feel more ashamed. "Thank you," he said, and took the piece of fruit. He looked down at his empty plate. How could he protect her? What would he even need to protect her from? Maybe Father felt sorry for him, and that's why he was sending him on this journey. Hope would be the one doing all the work with the scroll. He was unnecessary, just a clumsy tag-along. He gripped the slice of pear in his hand. He closed his eyes and envisioned his future. He and Hope were on some deserted planet years from now. He was sitting on a rock, feeling dejected. Hope looked at him and sneered. Years together had soured their relationship. He had ruined everything. "Hey, what's the matter?" Hope's expression was concerned. "Oh, nothing, sorry." He placed the slice of pear on his plate. "Don't lie!" Hope knitted her eyebrows and closed her eyes. She gripped his soul and rifled through his thoughts. She opened her eyes and stared at him in disbelief, then steeled herself and closed her eyes again tightly. "That's not you," she commanded. She was in his mind. "Don't you know who you are? Who Father sees you as? He talks to me about you. Don't you know how much he loves you?" Tears began to stream down her face. All of these emotions had drained Eliyahu. He could not fight it. He was so tired. He closed his eyes, let his walls down, and submitted to her. "I don't know," he thought. I just don't know." He felt a slap on the back of his head. He jumped and swung around. It was that ox-faced cherubim.
You made her cry. The rest of the banquet passed by in a blur. Eliyahu was exhausted and barely touched any of his food. Some of the elders gave speeches. One was about their responsibility towards Father's new race. They called up seraphim one by one and handed out their assignments. Some would be messengers and some guardians. A ceremony was held in the throne room for all of the celestials who would each visit Earth at some point in the future. Eliyahu and Hope did not attend, as they were preparing for their own ceremony. They were in an antechamber off the Great Hall. They had been given new robes and were being instructed on protocol. "So we just walk up when we are called? Then Father will bless us. Then Hope is supposed to take the scroll and select our first planet?" Eliyahu repeated back. "You are oversimplifying it," the seraphim retorted. "Do you remember where you are supposed to stand?" Eliyahu was inspecting the sleeve of his new garment, but responded distractedly. "Pass the torches, just like we did last time." The seraphim crossed its wings over its body. "Yes, but this time take a slow bow, then keep standing. And no hugging. I am in charge of making sure this goes smoothly." Hope looked quizzical. "What planet do we choose?" "That doesn't matter," said the seraphim. "Once you choose one, you will be gone and no longer my responsibility." "Choose one next to Earth," Eliyahu suggested. "Remember? Spiral formation?" "Oh yes, spiral," Hope winked. "Okay," the seraphim sighed. "If you are sure you know what you are supposed to do, we should make our way to the throne room." Eliyahu composed himself. "We are ready." The throne room was packed. The anticipation of being called forward was daunting. The last time, there was no warning, and they did not have time to get nervous. Eliyahu, Hope, and their seraphim companion stood just before the sea of glass. All was silent as they waited for Father. Eliyahu looked up and gazed at the emerald arch above them. He let out a deep breath, then looked at Hope. Her fists were clenched at her sides. She had a tense but excited expression. She looked at him, closed her eyes, and spoke to his mind. "I love you." He smiled. "I love you back," he thought. That was the first time she had said those words. And even though he had felt her love, the words unlocked a new part of him. Somehow, they made it more real. He thought of all the people she was leaving behind, yet she was happy. She really did love him. He just didn't know how that was possible. He felt a wave of excitement from her, but it did little to balance his nervousness. If anything, it intensified it. A soft breeze wafted through the great room, then the weight fell on them all. Together, they knelt as Father's presence rested on his throne. A moment passed before he spoke.
"Eliyahu, Hope, step forward."
This was it. Just walk forward. That's all you need to think about. Remember where to stand. There is nothing else but that. Hope grabbed his hand, and together they crossed the sea of glass. They passed the 7 torches, bowed slowly, and stood.
"Today is the 7th day, a day of rest.
I have completed my work and renewed all of creation." Father's light pulsed slowly as he spoke.
"There is much to see, but space is vast, and my sons and daughters cannot spare the time to see it all. What you write in your scroll will be shared with your brothers and sisters. What they see
will give them hope." At that moment, the golden embroidery on the robes of the assembly started to shimmer, and a sense of expectation filled the room.
Eliyahu, Hope, are you ready?
Eliyahu and Hope looked at each other, smiled, then nodded. Hope took off her necklace and held it in her outstretched hand. The metal liquefied, and within moments it transformed. Hope opened the scroll and found Earth, chose a planet next to it, and placed her finger on it. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and waited.
"Are you forgetting something?"
It was Father. A sinking feeling struck them. Had they forgotten something the seraphim had told them? Were they supposed to bow again? What did they forget? Hope lowered her gaze to the floor and stammered, Sorry, Father." The whole room felt his smile. It was an irresistible smile. Hope's eyes widened, then she spun toward Eliyahu and beamed at him. Tears of joy filled her eyes as she threw her arms around him. Then they were gone. Chapter 3. Ma'adim. They stood on a high precipice. The landscape before them was a vast desert of red sand and rocks surrounded by high mountains. The air around them was dry and frigid. It was a long walk to the top of the mountain, but Hope was determined to get a good view. "I have never seen an orange sky before," Eliyahu remarked. "Yeah, it's beautiful," Hope said, as she sat down on a smooth, flat boulder that lay precariously near the edge. She unrolled the scroll and saw an expanded view of the planet. She flicked her finger across it, and the planet spun. Hope grinned. "I think we are here," she said, and pointed to two small, glowing dots. Eliyahu dusted off the space next to her and sat down. "At least we won't get lost," he laughed. She touched the space next to the two dots, and the page went blank. The small writing utensil hidden in the umbilicus popped out. Hope grinned and pulled it out. "Okay, time to get to work." Eliyahu stood and walked to the edge and looked down. It was such an interesting place. He had never gone to other planets before the Great War, and had only been to one during the war. He had little time to explore it, as he spent most of his time in tents set up as field hospitals. He served as a medic healing injured angels, but when his time to serve ended, he was brought back home. A tiny flash of light caught his eye. It was far in the distance. A reflection? He stared at the spot to see if it would do it again, but nothing happened. He walked over and sat next to Hope. She was drawing the landscape with incredible detail. "You are really good at that," Eliyahu said. Hope smiled and crinkled her nose. Eliyahu brushed some red dust from his sleeve. "What do you think this planet is named?" he said. Hope pondered this for a moment. "The scroll doesn't say. But Father said if we had any questions, just ask." Eliyahu looked down. "How do we do that, exactly?" Hope closed her eyes and lifted her face. She inhaled deeply, then let it out slowly. "Father, what's this planet called?" She smiled, then nodded. "It's called Ma'adim." Eliyahu squinted, then asked, "Are you sure?" "Yes, Father told me," Hope exclaimed. Eliyahu looked somber. "How do you speak to Father?" Hope smiled sadly and turned to face Eliyahu. She placed her hands on his shoulders and rested her forehead on his chest. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Father?" Eliyahu gasped as he felt the weight. It was the same presence as in the throne room, but it felt different. The weight in the throne room could be described as a sort of holiness. This weight had elements of that, but something else as well. Attentiveness? Kindness? Curiosity? Was it acceptance, pride, or excitement? No, those words are not right. It almost seems wrong to put it into words. With the exception of one word, love. Tears started to well up in his eyes as the weight embraced them. The presence was external to them, yet it was internal. It surrounded them, but was within them. Eliyahu shuddered, then stood and walked to the edge. He wiped his face and tried to compose himself. The light flickered again. Hope, I think there is something out there." They discovered that they could use the scroll to move to other parts of the planet.
Eliyahu wished they had known that before spending half the day climbing that mountain. The light had flickered several more times, but they could not make out what it was and decided to investigate. They appeared on the opposite side of the vast desert near the base of a large cliff. Eliyahu surveyed their surroundings, but couldn't place where the light may have come from. A large pile of boulders rested against the rock face, but there was nothing there that he could see that would reflect light. "I don't see anything," Hope said. Just then, a loud crash, like the sound of two very large rocks smashing together, made them freeze. They looked at each other with wide eyes. "What was that?" Hope whispered. "Let's hide," Eliyahu responded. He beckoned her toward the far side of the rock pile. A massive boulder leaned against the rock wall, leaving a gap large enough to hide in. "In here," Eliyahu said. They climbed in and sat down on the soft, sandy surface beneath the rocky covering. Hope closed her eyes and tried to slow her breathing. "That wasn't natural." "I know," Eliyahu said. "I think someone is here." Just as he said that, they heard voices. The two looked at each other, fear covering their faces.
"I can't hear Father," Hope gasped.
The voices grew nearer. Then a dark figure came into view. The figure was tall and slender and clothed in a dark robe that was frayed and torn. Darkness seeped from it, and its voice was low and gravelly as it spoke. It was a fallen one. "Stay very still," Eliyahu quietly enunciated each word. He closed his eyes. His heart was pounding so hard that he wondered how the fallen could not hear it. Hope screamed. Eliyahu turned quickly to see another fallen behind them. It gripped Hope's arm firmly and was attempting to drag her out the other side of their rocky refuge. Eliyahu roared and threw himself at the fallen, but it knocked him aside with ease. He hit his head on the cliff wall, and everything went dark. Eliyahu woke up to the sound of Hope softly weeping. "Ugh, my head," he said. "You're okay." Hope nearly tackled him. "Ouch, that hurt," he said. "I think I broke a bone." Hope sat up. Her face was dirty and tear-stained, and he could see concern in her eyes. Eliyahu lifted his arm and winced. "Oh yeah, that's definitely broken." "What are we going to do?" Hope started to sob. "I haven't been able to talk to Father. I don't know why. I'm so scared." Eliyahu tried to move to comfort her, but the movement sent sparks of pain up his arm. He yelped. He closed his eyes and tried to think. "Well, I can probably heal this. That shouldn't be a problem. But about our situation..." He looked around the room. They were in a makeshift cell made from red stone. Twisted black metal bars blocked the only entrance. "I am not sure how to get out of this." Eliyahu looked at Hope's neckline. No necklace. "Did they take it?" he asked. Hope nodded. Eliyahu held his good hand over his broken arm and closed his eyes. He said the prayer he had been taught in medic training, and a faint blue light emitted from his wound. He stretched out his arm and wiggled his finger. "Good as new, see? We'll be okay." He put his hands on Hope's shoulders and looked into her eyes. Then suddenly realized that the last few times they had touched, he had not felt anything. Was something wrong with their bond? "Wow," she said. "I have never seen a healing." Eliyahu attempted a smile. If she had not noticed, he did not want to add to her worry. "Yeah, it's useful in a war, but not so much any other time." "It was useful today." Hope's spirits seemed to be lifting, and she gave him a faint smile. "Yeah, I guess it was," he agreed and smiled back. "So, how do you do it?" Hope asked. Eliyahu considered this. "Well, I just say the prayer, I guess." "But you took training, right? That's all they taught you?" "Well, no, there is other stuff too. It was years ago." Eliyahu paused, thinking. "One thing I remember is you had to believe it would work, otherwise it wouldn't. But it's easy for me because I have done it so many times." Hope lowered her head and covered her face with her hands. She began to weep. Eliyahu grimaced. What did he say? He sat next to her and put his arm around her.
He stared at his feet and strained to think of something to say that would help, but his mind was coming up blank. "I don't know what's wrong with me," Hope whispered. Wrong with her? He knew more than anyone that there was nothing wrong with her. She was perfect in every way. Eliyahu closed his eyes and pleaded for wisdom. How could he make her feel better? He gently rubbed her back, then leaned and rested his temple on hers. "Father hasn't left you. He will never leave you. I know he loves you more than I do. And I could never have imagined that a love like this was possible. There has got to be a reason for this. We just need to believe." Hope started to sob. Eliyahu took a deep breath and pictured her. He looked past her until she faded, and in the darkness, a small blue light flickered. He approached her. She was so delicate, not bright and vibrant like before. She looked weak, dim. It seemed as if their bond was dependent on their belief. He reached out his light and touched hers, and she responded. She began to pulse stronger and quicker, her light brightening. He felt her physical arms surround him. He embraced her back, still focusing on her light. "Father," he whispered, "give her strength." Her breathing slowed. He felt her peace. Hope moved to look into his eyes. She was determined. "Okay, let's figure out a way out of here." "These bars are not going anywhere." Eliyahu shook at them with all his strength. They didn't even rattle, despite the look of being hastily put into place. "Look, this one is slightly bent. I may be able to squeeze through," said Hope, as she squatted and rested a hand on the bent bar. Maybe," Eliyahu considered. "I will need to try first. I don't want you stuck on the other side by yourself." He bent down and put his arms through the gap. He tilted his head and managed to squeeze partially through. The bars were compressing his chest. He struggled to back out. "Help! I'm stuck!" Hope laughed and helped to guide him out. "Let me try." She put her arms through, grabbed the bars from the outside, and pulled as hard as she could. "Ouch!" she groaned, then fell to the floor on the opposite side of the bars. Eliyahu stared at her in disbelief, then fear covered his face. "Get back in here," he commanded in a hushed tone. "This is the only way. We need to get the scroll," Hope said, her face resolute. Eliyahu shook his head. "I am not leaving you." "You don't have to leave. Come with me," she pointed to her heart. Eliyahu bit his lip. "This is a horrible idea." Hope closed her eyes, her breath slowed. She looked at him and smiled. "I love you," she thought, then turned and disappeared around the corner. "What do you see?" Eliyahu paced the cell. "Just a lot of hallways, some doors, but they're locked." Hope's thoughts were loud and clear. He sensed excitement from her, confidence. "Any signs of Fallen?" "No, no one. It's like a maze in here. I am going to try down here. This hallway seems larger than the others." "Please, please be careful." Eliyahu's heart was pounding. He sat down and covered his face with his hands. "What are you doing now?" "I'm still in the hall. 1 second, I see something." "What is it?" "Just wait." Eliyahu started pacing again. What's taking her so long? "I hear voices," said Hope. "Here, listen." Eliyahu nearly jumped as he heard a low, raspy voice. "The cutters are taking too long. We are standing around waiting for stone. We cannot be blamed for the delay." Another voice spoke. "Send some from your team to help the cutters. No one should be standing around. Our master will be displeased if we fall behind schedule." The first voice grunted in consent, then was silent. Eliyahu was frozen with fear. "What is that?" he whispered. "Fallen," Hope responded. "I know Fallen. What are they doing? Did they see you?" "No, they're gone now. 1 sec, I'm going to check over here." Eliyahu was seated again, fists clenched over his eyes. "This is not good. This is not good." "Oh no," Hope sounded concerned. "I have to turn back." "What's going on?" Eliyahu shouted. "What have we got here?" It was a Fallen. A mouse escaped from her cage?
A second fallen grabbed Hope's wrists from behind and stretched out her arms. The first leaned in, and she could smell its rotten breath. Darkness oozed from under its hood as it hissed. Hope screamed. It struck her. Eliyahu ran to the door, roaring, and started to shake the bars. He stepped back and threw his weight into them. "Hope! Hope!" he shouted. He looked around the room frantically, looking for something they may have missed, but there was nothing. He shook the bars again, then crumpled to the floor. Two more fallen had joined in. One had a handful of her hair and yanked her head back, exposing her neck. Another tore a piece off of her robe. The first ran a crooked black finger up her throat. She was sobbing. The one holding her threw her to the floor and pulled out a black, spiked club. He rested it on her leg and pressed down hard. Hope screamed. Eliyahu rocked, kneeling at the foot of the barred doorway. "Father, help me!" he gasped. Tears streamed down his face. He slowed his breathing and looked up. "Father, help me!" The weight fell on him. It was rage. It was love. It was relentless. He grabbed the bars, and a blue light emitted from his hands. He stood and ripped out 2 long sections, then jumped through the opening and ran down the hallway. The metal sections in his hands started to liquefy and transform into 2 long blades. He gripped them tightly and ran to the first intersecting hallway. He stopped. "Right," a whisper commanded. He turned right and ran about 20 yards. "Left." He turned left and continued to run. "Stop." He stopped. There was a wooden door to his left. He tried to open it. It was locked. "Sword," the voice whispered. Eliyahu smiled and slashed the door to pieces. A startled fallen stood from a chair and gaped at Eliyahu. Eliyahu stormed in. Just as the fallen was lifting his arm, he hacked it off, then sent the other blade up through its stomach and into its heart. Eliyahu tore the blade from it, and it collapsed. He dashed to the door on the other side of the room. "Wait," he stopped. "The table." He turned around, and lying on the table, he saw a golden emerald pendant. Hope's eyes were closed tight. She was on her back, and she could feel the pressure of pointed fingers pressing into her shoulders. The fallen's breath was hot and wet on her cheek, and she could feel the cool darkness running down her neck.
"Your father can't save you here," the fallen rasped.
It pulled her up by her hair, then struck her. The other 3 fallen cackled.
"Tie her down,"
the one commanded. The 3 made their way toward Hope. The door behind them flew open. Eliyahu dashed to the nearest fallen and plunged his right blade through the back of its head, swung around, and with his left decapitated the next. The third, startled, dashed behind his remaining comrade and turned to face Eliyahu. The 2 fallen were standing facing him. One had Hope gripped around the throat. She was standing, but her eyes were closed. The weight was still on him. How dare they touch her? "Let her go!" he screamed. He gritted his teeth and walked toward the fallen, blades spread at his sides, dripping trails of black blood. The one holding Hope surveyed the area and quickly commanded, "Stop!" It seemed to be considering its options.
"What do you want?"
"I want Hope!" Eliyahu screamed and dashed to the right at a blinding speed and hacked off the leg of the other unsuspecting fallen. Then he drove the other blade through its head. The last fallen repositioned himself, placing Hope between him and the crazed celestial.
"I'll give her to you. Just put down your weapons."
Eliyahu stopped. He knew better than to trust them, but the fallen had Hope at his mercy. He closed his eyes. "Father?" He took a deep breath.
"Throw it,"
the voice whispered. He opened his eyes and whipped a blade at the fallen. It ducked out of the way, releasing Hope, but in an instant, Eliyahu was standing above it. He raised his remaining blade and brought it down on the fallen's head. Hope sat up and moaned. Eliyahu knelt beside her. "Can you stand?" He tucked a matted lock of hair behind her ear. "Are you okay?" "My leg," Hope groaned. Eliyahu helped her to her feet. Footfalls echoed in the corridor. They were coming in fast. "We need to get out of here." "What about the scroll?" Hope said. Eliyahu smiled and held up her pendant by the chain. She took it, held it out, and it transformed. She opened the scroll, revealing the magnified section of that planet. A loud, gravelly voice shouted from down the corridor. "There!" 6 fallen started to run in their direction. "Quickly!" Eliyahu pleaded. Without hesitation, Hope touched a section of the map.
Sand filled Eliyahu's open mouth and stung his eyes. He quickly grabbed Hope and pulled her to his chest, guarding her from the strong wind. It roared so loudly he couldn't hear anything, but he could tell she was crying by the trembling convulsions against his arms wrapped around her. Their first day, their first planet, a complete disaster. He needed to get her somewhere safe. He squinted his eyes and peered around. The sand was everywhere, a world of swirling red. It pelted against him, stinging his hands and face. They stumbled forward together, ducking against the wind. "Just keep walking," Eliyahu shouted. Hope did not respond. They just needed to find some cover so they could use the scroll and get off this planet. What had happened back there? Did Father help him? Did Father speak to him? He tested this theory. "Father, help us," he whispered. Nothing, no response. They continued to press forward. They had no idea what direction they were going or how far it would be till they found anything, either the end of this storm or some sort of shelter. The storm could be thousands of miles wide, and they could be in the center of it. Why did Father speak to him and not Hope? This was all too confusing. Eliyahu tripped and fell against a slanted surface. He grunted as his forehead collided with smooth stone. "Ouch, that hurt!" He stood and patted Hope's back to get her attention, then reached out to feel what he ran into. It seemed to be an angled wall of some sort, leaning back at about 45 degrees. "Let's follow this wall," he shouted. They pressed forward, Eliyahu's free hand trailing the stone surface. Had his healing power had something to do with the way those bars transformed into blades? It was the same blue light, but he said no prayer. He had felt the weight, so maybe it was Father, or maybe it was all in his head. The wall disappeared from his fingertips. He stopped and reached back and felt a corner in the stone. "This way!" he called out. They rounded the corner, and the wind ceased. They were in a small, dark room, the floor made of deep, soft sand, and the walls smooth, red stone. They moved away from the doorway and sat against the back wall. Hope's eyes were closed, and she was breathing slowly. He laid her down gently and looked her over. Blood seeped through her robe at her leg and shoulder, and there were tears everywhere. Eliyahu steeled himself, placed his hands on her stomach, and prayed. Nothing happened. He tried the prayer again, still nothing. He stood and paced the room. "What's going on?" Eliyahu yelled. He sat down and covered his face. "Father, she needs me, please help." He thought back on when the weight fell on him in the cell. How can he describe it? He felt anger, anger that someone would touch his daughter? Daughter. Did the weight amplify what he was feeling, or was he feeling what Father felt? He walked over and knelt next to Hope. He closed his eyes. "Father, show me how you feel about her." He opened his eyes and looked into her face. She was sleeping. For an instant, a faint gleam, like a whisper of light, danced just beyond his sight, fading as quickly as it came. "Father, she needs you. We need you." He felt a soft breeze and a faint sense of peace. "We are fathers," he said quietly, then placed his hands on her again and said, "Teach me." He felt a sensation of a smile, of love, of compassion, of sorrow. The peace increased, and a blue light surrounded Hope. Hope rolled over, then stretched, then yawned. The storm was over, and the sun was setting. "How long was I out?" she said sleepily. "A few hours," Eliyahu replied. Hope sat up and looked down at her robe. "I'm a mess, but thanks for healing me," she grinned at Eliyahu. He stood, then smiled back. "Let's get out of here." "Wait!" Hope jumped up and started for the door. "Where are you going?" Eliyahu groaned. "I want to see." Hope ran out the open door, and Eliyahu followed. They were staring at a giant pyramid made from polished red stone.
"Wow!" Hope exclaimed. "What do you think they are doing?" Eliyahu frowned. "I have no idea, but we should go." Hope opened the scroll, pinched the page revealing the solar system, and chose the next planet.
Chapter 4. The Veil. They stood atop a waterfall in the midst of a great forest. Eliyahu stood behind Hope with his arms wrapped around her, his eyes closed and his head resting on her shoulder. He let out a deep sigh and squeezed her tighter. "I could do this forever." Hope rested her head on his. "Me too, and we may just be doing this forever," she laughed. "Do you know what day today is?" Eliyahu opened his eyes sleepily. "What day is it?" "Today is 2,000 years since we started." Eliyahu chuckled. "You're keeping track? It seems like only yesterday." His words trailed off as he closed his eyes again. Hope ruffled his hair. "Let's climb down, sleepyhead." Eliyahu moaned. The path, carved by a small stream, wound down the slope to the base of the waterfall. Water thundered into the pool from above, raising a thick mist. Tall evergreens towered above them, masking the golden sky. Beams of light broke through the canopy, illuminating patches of ground and making the water sparkle with a golden radiance. Eliyahu threw his pack on the ground and sat down on a large rock beside the pool. He opened it and pulled out a small bag of dried leaves and a pair of wooden cups. "Tea?" he called out to Hope as she unpacked a change of clothes from her own bag. "I'd love some, but first I am going for a swim." Eliyahu smirked as he took out a small clay pot and leaned over, dipping it in the water. "I am going to see if I can find anything dry so we can start a fire." He stood up, unsheathed his blade, and walked off in search for firewood. Eliyahu could not think of a better life. The last 2,000 years had flown by so quickly. They had seen so much. Planets carved from ice, islands that floated in turquoise skies, lakes of lava that crested the horizon, massive trees that stretched into the clouds, and forests of giant mushrooms that cast an eerie light across dark and silent glades. The marvels they've seen were truly a testament to Father's amazing craftsmanship. He was proud of Hope's connection to Father and admired her for that. He, however, found it difficult to concentrate long enough to hear Father's voice. But he knew, if it was important, Father had no difficulty in reaching him. Eliyahu walked along the bank of the stream, picking up sticks and snapping an occasional branch into smaller pieces. The temperature on this planet was warm, but there was a faint breeze that made it quite comfortable. "This really is a nice planet," he said as he stuffed a large stick into the pile under his arm. "I could stay here for a while, maybe build a little house by that waterfall." He closed his eyes and pictured it. No more moving from planet to planet, a quiet life. Eliyahu felt a twinge of guilt and paused and looked down. The sound of the trickling water caught his attention, and he shifted his gaze. The water in the stream flowed day and night, unceasing, never stopping for rest and never slowing down. This thought made him uneasy, but he knew that Father would want them to press forward. Eliyahu put one last stick in his pile and headed back to camp. The fire crackled peacefully as the water in the pot started to boil. Eliyahu poured some steaming water into each cup and walked to the edge of the pool. Hope was floating on her back, rotating slowly, caught in a small whirlpool. He adored her. Everything she did filled him with joy. "You're incredible," he whispered. He lifted the 2 cups. "Tea is ready," he shouted over the thunderous roar of the waterfall. She was staring straight up, and something seemed odd about her expression. "Hey!" he yelled. She didn't respond. Slightly concerned, Eliyahu put down the teas and waded into the cool water. As he approached her, her unblinking stare made him more uneasy. He reached out and put his hand on her forehead, brushing back her wet hair. "Hey, you okay?" Her pupils dilated, and she became aware of him. Startled, she stood up and grabbed his hands. She looked shaken. "I saw something really weird," she gasped, then glanced up, then back at Eliyahu. "I was floating there, and I had this strange idea. You know how we shift to see each other's light? Well, I was talking to Father, and I felt this urge to try it there, just floating in the water. I let my vision blur, like always, but this time I kept going, feeling for something more. It was like I sensed a veil, a hidden curtain just beyond our light. I pressed through it, like pushing past a soft barrier, and it was like I was able to see a different realm. I saw creatures floating above me, made of golden light, detailed yet translucent. At first I was afraid, but they didn't seem to notice me, so I watched them. They were so beautiful. One looked like a whale. Eliyahu looked up nervously. "Can you see them now?" Hope lifted her head. "No, but I want to try again." "Okay, just like we normally do, but this time, widen your vision and ask Father to let you see." Hope tossed a handful of sticks into the fire and sat down in a pile of evergreen needles. Eliyahu sat down beside her. The thought of seeing giant, translucent flying creatures made him uneasy. But if Hope thought it was safe, he was willing to give it a try. "Okay, I am ready." He closed his eyes and found Hope. Her light was pulsing excitedly. He drew himself a bit closer and felt her encouragement. "I can see them," she thought to him. Eliyahu took a deep breath and widened his vision. "Father?" he breathed. Hope's light appeared to be getting smaller as his field of view stretched like an expanding bubble around him, then seemed to burst. This veil was thinner than he expected. He opened his eyes to see Hope staring at something behind him, her eyes wide with wonder. He slowly turned his gaze and saw a shimmering, horned animal grazing yards from where they sat. Hope stood and slowly approached the beast. "It looks like an elk," she whispered. Eliyahu came up beside her as she lifted her hand to touch the creature. He winced, but her hand passed right through it. "It doesn't seem to notice us," Eliyahu remarked. Let me try something." Hope smiled, then closed her eyes. She let out a deep breath, then the animal's eyes widened. It leaped back, stomped its hoof, and snorted. "What did you do?" Eliyahu whispered. Hope approached the beast cautiously with an outstretched hand. "It can see me now." "How?" "Just watch." The elk stomped its hoof again, but did not back down. "Shh, it's okay, elk," Hope said in a soothing manner. She placed her hand on its neck and stroked its mane. "Wow, you are a big, handsome guy. Can I draw you?" The elk now seemed unfazed by her and bent down to tear out a clump of grass. Hope giggled and stroked its side. Eliyahu frowned. This animal could be dangerous. Hope shot him a sarcastic smile, then turned to the elk. "This guy is not dangerous. He's a big sweetheart," she cooed. Eliyahu, still frowning, closed his eyes. "How did you do it?" he thought. "Just like before, but push deeper." Hope's thoughts trailed off. Eliyahu focused. He found the edge of his awareness, reached out and felt, groping in the darkness. He found it, another thicker veil. He readied himself and pressed through. The elk, no longer a shimmering, transparent figure, raised its head to look at him. It snorted once, then resumed grazing. "It's solid," Eliyahu exclaimed. Hope beamed at him. "Let's go." She grabbed his hand and led him away. "Let's see what else we can find." They walked along a brook that flowed through a narrow gully. The world was teeming with life. Sea creatures swam in the air above them, glimmering as they passed through rays of sunlight. Small, furry mammals gave chase to their companions, and large, bulky creatures trudged through the forest at a distance. Hope squeezed Eliyahu's hand. "We have seen countless worlds that our kind has never witnessed, but this world, we have never seen anything like this before. I didn't know that Father created things like this, at least not out this far." Eliyahu pondered this. "I wonder if creatures like this existed in places we have been, but we just didn't see them." "Maybe," Hope said gloomily. "It would make me sad to think that we missed it." The trees groaned and creaked. Evergreen needles drifted slowly down around them in a soft, whispering rain. Eliyahu looked up to see a giant golden creature descending. "It's my whale!" Hope exclaimed. It looked to be made from amber glass, flecked with golden sparks refracting beams of light as it passed through the rays of sunlight. The trees and branches gave way, straining to move out of its path, but it passed through them as if made of liquid. It lowered itself, passing slightly through the forest floor to rest at eye level directly in front of them. "It's curious about us," Hope whispered. Eliyahu bit his lip, but Hope walked cautiously forward. He gripped her hand and came alongside her. He readied himself and raised his other hand and gently touched its vibrant face. His finger penetrated the surface, causing ripples of golden light across its translucent body. He pulled the finger out, the substance stretching then snapping back. Hope gasped. She placed both her hands on it, then sunk them deep into the surface. Eliyahu's face twisted with panic. "It's cold," Hope laughed. "I think it will let me draw it." She pulled both hands out, sending ripples cascading across the enormous creature. The whale drifted leisurely, circling Hope as she attempted to draw it. Hope perched on a large flat stone in the center of the brook, but found herself needing to shift positions often to keep it in sight. Eliyahu laid back beside her, his eyes closed and fingers locked behind his head. He loved to watch her draw. Her light was alive with swirling shades of blue, rapidly shifting and forming delicate patterns. Her creativity amazed him. He drew himself near to her light and felt her stiffen, increasing the focus on her work. He chuckled. She did not like to be disturbed when she worked. He felt her sense of guilt. "I'm sorry," she thought. "You know how focused I get when I am drawing. Come here." He felt her beckon him. Eliyahu's heart soared as he flung himself into her light. He wrapped her around himself like a blanket and looked through her eyes. "Wow, he is amazing. This is probably your best yet." "You always say that," Hope smiled. She pinched the page, zooming into the trunk of a tree, and started to add detail to the bark. Eliyahu took a breath and expanded through the rest of her body. He felt the weight of the golden writing utensil in her hand as it carefully detailed a section of the trunk. "I wish I knew how to draw," Eliyahu thought. "You probably could," Hope laughed. "You've spent so much time in my hand, I bet you're a natural." "I think I'm about done. What do you think?" The giant amber whale, illuminated by rays of sunlight, hovered above the rocky brook running through the glade. The trees speckled with golden dots bent around it, framing the massive creature. "I love it," Eliyahu thought. Hope put down the scroll, sighed, and laid back. She closed her eyes and plunged into Eliyahu's mind. She walked through his thoughts as if in a garden, gently strolling and stopping to admire the flowers. Eliyahu relaxed and came up beside her. "I love you," he thought. Hope smiled sadly. "Why do you resist Father?" Eliyahu tensed. "Resist him?" Hope was silent. "I don't try to resist him. I don't know. I feel like he is the one resisting me. He talks to you all the time, but unless there is an emergency, I get nothing." "Are you sure he doesn't speak to you?" Hope said gently. "Sometimes it's just that we aren't really listening. Unless there is an emergency." Hope smiled. The sun had set, and their small campfire sent sparks snapping up into the dark forest canopy. Eliyahu pulled 2 bound mats from his pack and unrolled them beside the ring of stones that surrounded their fire. They would finish their survey tomorrow. This planet deserved the extra attention. He sat down on his mat and stacked some larger sticks onto the fire. Hope was off talking to Father, as was her custom this time of day. He felt a bit resentful. He was not the one resisting. He wanted to talk to Father. "Why can't I hear you?" he whispered. He took a deep breath and listened. No response. He stared down at his hand and let his mind wander. "It's not like I'm not trying," he huffed. He closed his eyes and peered around. He saw Hope's faint glow a distance off. She pulsed peacefully. She was safe. The life on this planet seemed gentle, untouched by the corruption of the fallen. Apart from their first planet, they had only encountered them one other time, and just briefly. It seemed as if they had focused their efforts on Earth. The sound of leaves rustling behind him made Eliyahu turn. It wasn't Hope. An animal? He stood and craned his neck. The dancing firelight cast shadows, making it hard to see. He stepped to the edge of their camp and squatted down. A soft whimper drifted from just beyond an illuminated shrub. He stood, cautiously circled the bush, and saw a small, four-legged creature. It let out a faint whine, struggled to rise, then collapsed. Eliyahu sighed. Hope would kill him if he didn't try to help this poor beast. He laid his hand on the creature's soft head and muttered his healing prayer as blue light engulfed it. He stood and looked down at it. "Okay, you're better. Run along." Eliyahu walked back to camp and flopped down. The animal trailed behind, then sat on Hope's mat beside his. "That's Hope's mat!" Eliyahu rebuked the creature. It stood and stared at him. Its long tongue lolled from its open mouth, and a tail began to wag. Its dark brown eyes were bright and playful, but Eliyahu's were not. He stood and stared down at it, frowning, his arms folded. "Look, you've gotten Hope's bed dirty." He pointed at the mat. He felt Hope's presence, a sense of curiosity. Then she looked through his eyes. "Ooh, it's so cute," she thought. "I am coming right now." The creature, apparently resembling a dog, slept soundly in Hope's lap. Eliyahu sat frowning at it as she scratched behind its ears, stroked its back, and whispered it praises. "I am really tired," Eliyahu stated dryly. "You can go to sleep if you want. I can't move, or I will wake him," Hope whispered. Eliyahu glowered. "I am not going to sleep until you do." Hope whispered something into the dog's ear. "You better not be talking badly about me to it," Eliyahu said. "Of course not," Hope laughed. Then she looked down at the sleeping dog, giving him a secret wink. Enjoying the rub-down, the dog rolled over and stretched out, exposing his underbelly. "Look, he's not even sleeping, he's just pretending," Eliyahu exclaimed. Hope looked at Eliyahu, smiling and crinkling her nose. Eliyahu awoke to the pattering of rain against his face. He sat up and moaned. By the state of his clothes and mat, it had been raining for a while. "I'm sopping wet." He looked at Hope. She was still asleep, the dog curled up tightly beside her. He walked over, squatted down, and stroked her hair. "Hey, we should pack up," he said gently. Hope opened her eyes and smiled at him, his favorite part of the day. The dog nestled tighter against Hope's side, attempting to hide from the rain. "Okay, time to get up," she said softly, and picked up the dog and stood, cradling it in her arms. "I found it over in those bushes. It should be fine there for now," Eliyahu said over his shoulder as he started to roll up his mat. The lack of reply made him quizzical, and he turned around to see Hope standing in the rain, cradling the shivering pup, her face devastated. He stared at her blankly. "No," he said. Her face contorted as if to cry. Eliyahu rolled his eyes and sighed. "Yay! You're coming with us!" Hope exclaimed. Eliyahu finished rolling up the mats as Hope gathered some scattered belongings. Due to the rain increasing in intensity, they decided to make their way to the next planet. Who knows? Maybe they would continue to find interesting things if they looked hard enough. The dog followed beside Hope, sniffing and inspecting each item. Hope emptied rainwater and leaves from the kettle and placed it in her sack. The dog picked up a teacup in his jaw and dropped it at her feet. "Oh, thank you! You're so chivalrous! You're a good dog!" she cooed. "That will be your name, Chivalry!" "All right, are you ready?" Eliyahu asked as he closed his bag. "We're ready!" Hope smiled brightly as she pulled off her pendant necklace. Chapter 5. The Lie. A dark, deafening silence surrounded them. Eliyahu's ears popped. The sky above was black as obsidian, with a single, faint light in its vast emptiness. Their feet sank into soft white, fine sand, stretching out in a vast, flat desert as far as their eyes could see. The air was cool and thin. Eliyahu looked down and toed the sand with his shoe, sending particles that drifted, hovered for a moment, then sank back down. "Gravity is low," he said. Hope rolled up her scroll and looked around. "Not much to draw here," she said, pursing her lips. "I'm going to check the other realms." She blinked 3 times, then exclaimed, "Here we go!" Her eyes shone with wonder. Eliyahu followed her lead. They stood in a mushroom forest. The mushrooms towered hundreds of feet high, glowing with a ghostly violet light illuminating the ground around them. Their giant caps, overlapping at different heights, blocked out the sky as plumes of spores burst from large, blade-like gills. Chivalry, their veteran explorer, bounded forward, leading them through the eerie forest. The spores hung suspended in pockets of various size, color, and luminosity. "It looks like a nebula," Hope said, smiled, and squeezed Eliyahu's hand. "It's quite beautiful," he said pensively. They had spent nearly 4,000 years together. Their life before that, a distant memory. The last planet that had been their home had been their paradise for 60 years. Eliyahu closed his eyes and thought back on the rolling green hills, rocky cliffs bordering a deep blue ocean, the wind that carried the scent of the salty sea, the home they had built, and their animals. But disaster had struck. Their sun had gone supernova. He remembered the sky's change. A blinding light had erupted. Their sun, a searing white star, swelled in the heavens. The deep blue ocean gleamed, reflecting the fire above. A silent roar swept the rolling hills. The air shimmered with heat. The sea boiled, and their animals fled. The sky faded to ashen gray, a vast shroud of dust veiling their land, leaving only a faint, pulsing glow where their sun had burned. It had been 2 years since they resumed their journey, traveling from planet to planet, documenting what they saw. Their 4 attempts to find peace had come to a horrific end. Hope always seemed reluctant to stay and said these disasters were Father's way of moving them forward. But the continual change, day by day, new planet, was like the constant drip of water that started to unravel Eliyahu's mind. He needed to be grounded. He needed stability. The last 2 years were difficult, and if it wasn't for Hope, he would be afraid to think what he would have become. Eliyahu placed his hand on the trunk of a tall mushroom. Its base was thick, wider than his old house. He ran his hand across the slightly warm, glassy surface. He sighed. Chivalry bounded, circling them, kicking up great clouds of sand that hovered in suspended trails behind him. "You look like a comet, Chivalry," Hope laughed. Her cheerfulness and optimism was something that Eliyahu depended on. A lifeline that kept him from sinking into the deepest, darkest places of his mind. He walked over to Hope, who was sitting cross-legged near the base of a stout mushroom, and flopped down in the sand beside her. A great plume of fine sand surrounding him. He stared straight up at the great gills of the mushroom's cap above him and watched as a cloud of spores erupted downward. "It's very purple here," he muttered. "I love purple," Hope said, then pouted in his direction. Hope unrolled the scroll and tapped the page with the end of the pen absent-mindedly. How should I draw this scene?" she pondered. "Do you want to watch?" She nudged Eliyahu's shoulder. "I don't know," Eliyahu groaned. "I think I'm going to go for a walk." He stood, picked a direction, and started walking. There seemed to be nothing but mushrooms on this planet. Eliyahu didn't even like mushrooms. Every mushroom looked the same, just like every planet looked the same. Eliyahu laughed bitterly. This planet represented their life. His relationship with Father was stagnant, barren, just like this endless wasteland. He didn't blame Father. He knew the fault was with him. He just didn't know what it was. He had tried for years to hear Father. It was no surprise that Father would speak to someone like Hope, but him? No, maybe it was better this way. He would just do his duty and protect Hope. Movement caught his eye, but the source disappeared behind a trunk just as he turned. Eliyahu stared blankly at where it had vanished. "I've got nothing else to do," he said dryly, then headed off in that direction. He approached the mushroom's giant base and circled it. A strange creature floated just before him. Its translucent bell pulsed, tentacles trailing like glowing wisps. He had seen similar species that Hope had called jellyfish. He sat down against the base of the trunk and watched it. Its bell flickered with intensity, lighting the ground around it with various colors. He rested his head back and continued to stare at the creature. Why had Hope made him feel guilty for wanting to find a place that he could call home? He had never belonged anywhere before. She had had friends once, somewhere she belonged, but no one cared about him. Why was it so wrong that he found something like that? And why did Father have to destroy 4 of his homes? It would take them millions and millions of years to survey every planet. What was 60 years compared to all that? Did he not deserve a small break? The jellyfish floated gently towards him, bright lights zipping up and down its lightly swirling tentacles. Hope probably was complaining to Father about him right now. He huffed. "I'll prove it." He closed his eyes and found Hope's soft blue light a distance away, flickering in a sea of darkness. He approached slowly. As he drew near, he switched planes, revealing the physical world. He saw her sitting by the base of her mushroom. She was surrounded by 4 jellyfish. She gazed at them, mesmerized, her pen motionless in her hand. Chivalry slept soundly beside her, his slow breath making miniature cyclones of sand beside his nose. Eliyahu needed to get closer. He made himself small, then drifted, circling around and coming up behind her. He reached out and slowly extended his light to the back of her head. He was in, and undetected.
Bring hope? How could I possibly think that my drawings would bring Father's children hope? They are just stupid drawings and dry facts about planets that no one will ever go to. This whole thing is pointless. Father doesn't need me. Maybe we should have just found a new place to live. Hope paused. Eliyahu felt things in her that he had never felt or never noticed. I should be more supportive. I know it bothers him to move from place to place every single day, and all for a mission that has no end or even a purpose. Maybe Father wanted us to find a planet that we liked and stay there. Hope took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Maybe you should stay here. It's nice. The jellyfish are beautiful. Maybe it's time you take that scroll and throw it away. I should throw it away. If you throw it away, you won't be tempted to drag Eliyahu on any more pointless surveys. You can live here, together. Lights flickered across Hope's face as the jellyfish clustered around her. You should go for a walk, then toss away that awful scroll. Yes, let's toss it away. This place is nice. We will be happy here. Hope stood and slowly started to walk forward, tightly surrounded by jellyfish. Eliyahu opened his eyes, groaned, and rubbed his temples. What is she doing? I don't want to live here. He tried to stand, but a wave of dizziness made him sit back down. Wow, I am so tired. He let out a deep breath. The jellyfish's light pulsed melodically. So bright. I just need to close my eyes for a second. Then I'll go stop her. But this is what you have always wanted. Imagine, no more planet to planet. You can build a house here. Eliyahu huffed. A house? Made out of mushrooms? A house on a quiet, peaceful planet. And this planet is safe. You won't need to worry about suns or volcanoes or asteroids or earthquakes. Asteroid? Why did I say that? Did an asteroid cause that tsunami? Eliyahu opened his eyes. The jellyfish was uncomfortably close. I can't think with all this flashing, Eliyahu shouted as he stood to his feet. The jellyfish, startled, drifted back. Eliyahu felt fear, but it wasn't his own fear. What is going on? He moaned and gripped his head. My head is killing me. He looked up and squinted at the jellyfish with scrutiny. He blinked and switched realms. A fallen one stood before him. Eliyahu reached for his blade, but it was gone. The fallen one laughed. You lost that when your last home was destroyed. Eliyahu backed up, pressing his back against the trunk, then composed himself. What do you want? He asked. I want hope, the fallen one said mockingly, then chuckled. Eliyahu winced. It's you!
The fallen one laughed. Actually, it continued, she's insignificant. We want the scroll, and once we have it, we will leave you in peace to spend the rest of eternity on this beautiful planet that we have created for you. In an instant, it vanished. Eliyahu let out a deep breath, then inhaled as a plume of spores drifted down around him. Another wave of dizziness made him lose his balance. Hope was in danger. He needed to warn her. He sank to the ground, closed his eyes, found her light, and shot toward it. Eliyahu stopped yards from Hope, who stood before a large circular pit surrounded by fallen ones. An iridescent dome engulfed the scene. "Hope!" he shouted, but she didn't turn. Her glazed eyes were fixed on the abyss below. "Hope!" Eliyahu cried, hurling himself at the dome's wall. His small light bounced off the impenetrable surface, which hummed when struck but showed no sign of yielding. He circled for a better view, his heart racing. "This can't happen," he growled as panic and rage pulsing through him. He would destroy anything that threatened her. One of the fallen beside Hope looked up, and Eliyahu felt it smile beneath its dark hood. It turned to her. "Eliyahu doesn't care about your drawings. Remember, you offered to let him watch, and he left? He'd rather walk alone than be with you. You offered companionship, and he snubbed you. He probably laughs at your drawings behind your back." A tear fell from Hope's cheek, reflecting violet light, then vanished into the darkness below. "Maybe he'd be happier alone. You drag him down, forcing him to do things he doesn't want. Imagine his joy, a home on a grassy hill overlooking the ocean, just like he used to have. And his trusty companion, Chivalry, by his side. Take one step, and you'll give him that gift." "No!" Eliyahu screamed, bouncing off the dome's glassy surface. It vibrated musically, unmoved by his agony. He struck it again and again, screaming. A gravelly voice spoke beside him. "There's no way in." Eliyahu turned to face the fallen one. "Let me in now!" he demanded. "Oh, I'm sorry," the fallen one said dryly. "I forgot. What gives you the right to interfere with our business?" "She's mine!" Eliyahu roared. "Ah," the fallen one chided. "But you dismissed her. You left her in our care. We have a right to be here. You, however, do not." Eliyahu looked at Hope, her face twisted in pain as tears fell. "Take me," he pleaded desperately. "I'll do anything. Just let her go." The fallen one chortled. "I love hearing that, but we don't want you. Why would we? You're the most worthless creature your father ever created." It laughed, then vanished. "Why do you hesitate? It's the right thing to do," a fallen one whispered to Hope. "Don't be selfish. Take the step, and this sadness will end, and everyone can move on with their lives. It's what your father would want." Hope lifted her arm and wiped her tears with her sleeve. "Father loves me," she said. "Yes, he loves you and wants to be with you," it replied. "Take the step and be with your father. If you don't, you'll make Eliyahu miserable for eons." Hope closed her eyes, letting out a silent sob. "I could explore those eyes for eons," she murmured. The fallen one hesitated. "What?" it asked. "I could explore those eyes for eons," she repeated. "That's what Eliyahu said to me days before we left. We stood in his room, both nervous and awkward. I was consumed by my love for him, talking about him to anyone who'd listen." Hope opened her eyes and laughed through her tears. "I didn't know how to respond, so I winked at him. I felt foolish after. But at the banquet, The first time we bonded, I saw how he feels about me. It's the same as Father. Eliyahu's love for me is Father's love." She looked up at the fallen one. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Hope's face was resolute. "Father, I'm sorry I was afraid. Sorry I doubted you. Give me strength to believe." The four fallen ones hissed and backed to the dome's edge. "I am Father's!" Hope shouted, pointing at them. "Leave us alone!" she cried. The fallen ones vanished, taking the dome and pit with them. Hope collapsed. Eliyahu shot forward, diving into Hope's light. She gasped. His love and pride for her soared. He wrapped his light around hers, pressing in his joy and admiration. They stood together in the garden of their mind, locking eyes and holding hands. "You were amazing," Eliyahu said. Hope beamed. "I'm sorry I doubted you," she replied. Eliyahu looked down. "No, I'm sorry. I don't know why it took me so long to realize. You're my home. I don't care where we are or what we're doing. As long as I have you, I'm grounded." Hope smiled. "Me too." Hope wandered through the mushroom forest, cutting a path with her body through the spore nebula as she walked breathing through the sleeve of her robe. She was accompanied by Chivalry, who had slept through the entire ordeal, and Eliyahu, still nestled in her mind, watched out her eyes as she strolled. "I wonder how long they've been following us," Eliyahu said. "They seem to know about our travels, even our homes being destroyed." Hope frowned. "I'm not sure, but I feel like they may have been causing more problems for us than we realized." "But we're on to them now," Eliyahu reassured her. Hope nodded. "Yeah, they won't fool us again." Chivalry bounded forward, his comet tail trailing behind him as he cornered a mushroom's trunk. "Ouch!" Eliyahu thought. "He's biting me." Hope laughed and circled the trunk to see Eliyahu's prone body slumped against the base of the mushroom, his foot in Chivalry's mouth. "Hey, don't bite Eliyahu." She bent down and stroked their furry companion. "I don't want to leave." Eliyahu pulled Hope's light tightly around himself and nested deeper. "Oh, you want to stay? This is a nice planet, and we can build a house out of mushrooms." Eliyahu's body sat straight up and immediately stood. "Okay, time to go." Chapter 6. The Dream. Eliyahu stretched, yawned, and rolled onto his side. Chivalry's back paw rested on his cheek and twitched rhythmically. Eliyahu glowered and sat up. The dog seemed to be dreaming. "Chasing fallen ones?" Eliyahu chuckled. He looked across the field of tall green grass where they had made camp the night before. The sun, a radiant orb of molten gold, crested the horizon, warming the lush meadow with a gentle glow. This planet, teeming with unique life, had taken Hope 3 days to catalog, and this morning was their planned departure. He walked over to Hope and knelt beside her. He carefully brushed the hair from her face, then bent down to inspect her more closely. Her breath was deep and slow, her mouth open, her eyebrows twitching. He smiled and studied her for a moment, watching the small shifts in her expressions. 6,000 years together, and she still amazed him. He closed his eyes. "Father, please bless your daughter and bless our journey today." Hope murmured something softly in her sleep. "What are you dreaming about?" he whispered. He closed his eyes and stood beside her in a cozy wooden room. A fire crackled in a fireplace, and snow fell silently outside windows that bordered the tiny cabin. She was scolding a small being who stood defiantly with hands on its hips. "Don't throw your toys at Chivalry!" Hope exclaimed. "He was gnawing on Turtle," the being declared, holding up a cloth turtle, white stuffing hanging from its torn leg. Hope looked at the being sympathetically, then at Chivalry, who stood bashfully in the corner. "Is that true, Chivalry?" Chivalry hung his head as the being began to cry. Hope scooped him up in her arms and wiped his tears. "It's okay. We can fix Turtle, don't worry," she smiled. Eliyahu sat, unseen in the corner, and watched as Hope and the being sat by the hearth, quietly stacking multicolored blocks, Chivalry curled up asleep beside them. Firelight lit the room with a soft, warm glow, casting shadows that danced on the walls. What was this dream? Watching Hope interact with this being fascinated him. The being looked like a miniature celestial, something he had never seen. And there was something different about Hope. She was joyful, but that wasn't uncommon. What was it? It seemed as if after all this time, there was still more to learn about her. Hope spoke softly as she placed another block on a tower the being was building. He looked up and laughed at something she said. She smiled and winked at him. 3 quick thuds at the door startled Eliyahu from his pondering. The door opened, and a figure walked in, brushing snow from his shoulders. "Daddy!" the being yelled and ran to the figure, who bent down, picked him up, and spun him around as the being giggled with delight. The being squirmed down and ran back to his blocks. "I missed you," Hope said to the figure, and walked over to embrace him. She held him for a moment, then looked into his eyes, love and admiration gushing from her heart like a river. Eliyahu's stomach was in knots, but the scene started to fade in a bright light, then was gone. Hope stood radiant, dressed in a shimmering white robe. Her back was to him, and she stood motionless. An ocean of clouds swirled around them, and they began to move at great speed. With no wind, Eliyahu could not tell if they were moving or if the clouds were. They moved faster and faster until everything blurred, then a bright flash illuminated the scene, and they stood before a throne. It was Father's throne, but not as it appeared in the vast throne room. It stood alone, resting in a sea of gold-crested clouds in an endless, bright blue sky. The weight fell upon them, and Father's presence settled on the throne. Hope was about 30 paces ahead of him. She looked up, and Father spoke.
"Daughter, my Earth is about to enter a new season, one that will change it forever. Your mission is about to change, and so will you. Your path will lead you to Earth, where you will spread hope in new ways. And remember, I will be with you." Something struck Eliyahu's forehead, and he fell back, dazed. "Ouch!" he and Hope exclaimed simultaneously. He was sitting in the dirt beside Hope's mat, and she cradled her forehead in her hands. She peered up at him through squinted eyes and smiled painfully. "Why do you always hover right above my head?" she laughed. "When I visit your dreams, I just lie down next to you, and no one gets hurt." "Why do you always sit up so fast?" Eliyahu responded, rubbing his head. Hope crawled over and flopped on her back, her head resting in Eliyahu's lap, and looked up at him. "Did you hear what Father said?" she asked. The dream began to return to Eliyahu. He stared blankly at a clump of ferns swaying gently at the edge of their camp. This is big. Was their mission over so soon? There were countless planets left to explore. No, it couldn't be over. This was just a small detour. They would finish this quickly and get back to their life. Eliyahu steeled himself. "It's okay. Father has something new for us, but we will do it together," he reassured her, and himself. Hope gazed up at him, her eyes darting back and forth as she studied him. She reached up and brushed an eyelash from his cheek. "We should pack up," she whispered. Hope unrolled the scroll. A solitary dot marking Earth stood alone on the page. "I guess Father isn't giving us any options," Eliyahu remarked. "I think this is important, bigger than us. Are you ready?" Hope asked. Eliyahu rested his head on her shoulder and closed his eyes. "Let's just get it over with. Chivalry, come!" He rested his hand on Chivalry's head, and Hope placed her finger on Earth. A cold wave of seawater drenched Eliyahu's robe up to his waist. Hope yelped and clung to him. It was a bright, hot afternoon, and the sun shone high in the clear blue sky. They stood on the shore of a deep turquoise ocean, waves crashing onto an endless sandy beach. Small birds chased the receding waves and pecked at the sand, searching for tiny sea creatures. "This is Earth?" Eliyahu said pensively. Chivalry barked and leaped forward, scattering a group of birds. Hope and Eliyahu held hands and walked along the shore in the cool, wet sand as foamy waves washed over their feet. "I like the color scheme. The breeze is nice, the temperature and gravity comfortable. It's bright. Not a bad planet."
Hope smiled and shook her head. You really should have gone to all the days of creation. I know that, Eliyahu exclaimed. You've mentioned it many times. Hope laughed and squeezed his hand. Eliyahu felt uneasy. Father said this planet was about to change, and he didn't know what that meant. Change how? Would they be here for the change, or were they to survey before it changed and then leave? What are you going to draw? Eliyahu asked. I'm not sure, Hope said, pursing her lips and looking around. Those trees are neat. She pointed inland at a row of stout, thick-trunked trees with dense, fan-like leaves. Well, let's draw something quickly. Maybe we can get out of here in a single day. Hope frowned. I don't know. Father said something about our mission being different. She took off her necklace and held it out. Eliyahu scrutinized it as nothing happened, a deep sense of dread beginning to fill him. It doesn't usually take this long, right? Hope looked concerned. I think we're supposed to stay here for a while. She put the necklace back around her neck and started toward the group of trees. Eliyahu followed a few paces behind. They were trapped there. This was a new sensation. They had always relied on the scroll and on many occasions needed to make a hasty exit to escape danger or catastrophe. Hope placed her hand on a trunk, inspecting the ridged bark. I would have really loved to draw you. You're a beautiful tree. There's a trail here, Eliyahu announced. He stood in an opening in the dense brush behind the row of trees, a straight, sandy path cutting through the thicket. Hope walked over and stood beside him. Movement caught Eliyahu's eye. A being on the trail was approaching them. It's a man, Eliyahu whispered urgently. Hope gasped and stared, eyes wide. What do we do? We should ask it, to state its purpose. Eliyahu crossed his arms, steeled himself, and stared at the being as it slowly made its way down the trail. The being, or man, was struggling to carry an assortment of objects. It was dragging a sizable, apparently heavy box with one hand, a long staff wrapped in cloth over its shoulder, and a large square object made from a metal frame and fabric strapped to its back. Maybe we should offer to help it, Hope said. Eliyahu squinted. We don't even know if it speaks. Hope closed her eyes and lifted her face. He knew she was talking to Father. Hopefully, she would get some direction, and they would find out what they were supposed to do here. Okay, Father said we can speak to them. She stepped forward and addressed the man. Hello, she beamed. My name is Hope, and this is my brother Eliyahu. Do you need help carrying your belongings? The woman looked at Hope quizzically for a moment. Good afternoon. Sure, I was just going to set up right over here. She dropped the box and motioned toward the shore. Eliyahu looked at the box, rolled his eyes, and grabbed the handle. The woman unfolded the metal frame into a seat and set it in the sand, then took her staff and stabbed it into the ground, pulling on the cloth until it expanded into a circle held up by slender metal rods. What is this? Eliyahu marveled, peering underneath to inspect the mechanism. The woman, slightly confused, looked at Eliyahu. My umbrella? Umbrella, Eliyahu said softly. Is this all the shelter you have? How often do you move? The woman, looking uneasy, glanced at Hope, who was beaming at her. Do you want a drink? She sat in her chair, pulled over her box and opened it, pulling out 2 containers. Thank you, Hope said, taking the drinks. Oh, they're cold, Hope laughed. Well, I have to get back to my book now, the woman said, pulling out a rectangular object from a small bag around her waist, opening it and setting it on her lap. The book had many small pages, unlike a scroll, and each page was filled with words, presumably the language of this species. Hope, surprised, gaped at Eliyahu. They have scrolls! The end of the path led to a busy street. The chariots of this planet were called cars, and the streets were full of them. Hope wanted to find the library where the woman had told her they could find the scrolls of this world. She said to take a left and walk straight for about a mile. The library is a large tan building with large windows. Hope looked unreasonably excited. I'm not sure why we need a library, Eliyahu stated. I doubt they'll just let us read their scrolls. We need to learn about this planet. It's the only way for us to blend in. Did you see how that woman looked at you when you couldn't open your drink? You couldn't open yours either, and you called her a man, Eliyahu said. That's my point. We don't know anything about this world, and for the time being, we're stuck here. Hope stopped and turned to Eliyahu, holding his hands. We don't know exactly what Father's mission for us is. We need to be prepared. Eliyahu sighed. I guess you're right, he conceded. They passed many humans on the sidewalk. The street was meant for cars and the sidewalk for humans. Eliyahu noted that if you stood in the street, the cars would honk at you, indicating you were in the wrong place. Hope greeted some humans initially, introducing herself, but wasn't getting the responses she had hoped for. I don't think they like us, Hope said sadly. Maybe it's our robes, Eliyahu responded. I don't see many people dressed like us. Possibly, Hope pondered. They don't really seem to greet each other either. I thought this would be more like home, where everyone is friendly, but these people seem kind of upset. Eliyahu huffed. I don't know what reason they have to be upset. Father created them as his prized race. Hope was silent, seeming to consider this. We've been gone for a long time. I wonder if something happened. The door to the library opened of its own accord, as if to welcome them.
Chivalry, I think you need to wait outside, Hope said, patting his head.
Chivalry whined, then lay down in a shady spot behind a large pillar. You'll be all right out here. We won't be too long, Eliyahu reassured him. Cool air and the scent of old scrolls wafted out of the open door. They stepped in. The entryway was grand, rising 3 stories. The floor was smooth, polished brown stone flecked with black and copper, and 2 spiral staircases against the far wall led to the second level, where they could see shelves stacked with rows of books. Wow, Hope exclaimed. There are so many. An aged woman sat at a desk toward the back of the room and was staring at them intently. Hope approached her. Hello, my name is Hope, and this is my brother Eliyahu. Could we read some of your books? The woman grinned at her. Of course, but you'll need a library card to check any out. She pointed to a piece of paper taped to her desk. Hope looked at Eliyahu and whispered, What's check out? Eliyahu shrugged, then stepped forward and glanced down at the paper. There was a picture of some books and many words he could not read. How can we get one of these library cards? He asked the woman. The woman opened a drawer, pulled out some papers, and placed them in front of her. I can help with that. I just need a photo ID. Eliyahu tugged on Hope's sleeve and sent her a thought. What do I say? The woman continued to smile blankly at him, waiting for something. Let me ask Father, Hope thought back. Eliyahu, beginning to feel the pressure, smiled at the woman. Sorry, 1 second. No problem, take your time. I've got nothing else going on, the woman chuckled. Hope reached into her robe and pulled out a small card with her picture on it. It's in your pocket, she whispered. Eliyahu reached into his pocket and pulled out an identical card, but the depiction was of him. At least we know we're on the right track, he said under his breath, and handed the woman his card. Chapter 7. The Acquaintance. The library was one of the most boring places Eliyahu had ever been. He spun his chair, the shelves whirling around him, and Hope's disapproving face passed by 3 times before she hushed him. Your chair is squeaking. He stopped and looked at her, but she continued to spin in his vision. He chuckled. Are we almost done here? No, I have much more to read, she said, gesturing to the stacks of books piled around the large conference table where they sat. Did you know that Father gave this race a scroll? Eliyahu's eyes widened. What? Father gave them a scroll? He looked around at the racks of books and furrowed his brow. Then why do they need all these? Hope rubbed her chin pensively. They like to make books, I guess. She looked down and continued reading. She was flipping pages faster than Eliyahu could comprehend. Father had taught her to read, and to read very quickly. What does Father's book say? Eliyahu said. Hope stopped, then paused. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Eliyahu put his head down on the table with a thud. Just tell me, he said dryly. Father became a man, whispered Hope. Eliyahu raised his head and gave Hope a sarcastic smile. I'm serious, she said. Eliyahu rolled his eyes and entered her mind. His face went blank. Are you serious? He yelled. Shh, you're going to get us in trouble again. Eliyahu closed his eyes and focused. They rebelled, just like the fallen ones, he thought. And instead of casting them down, he became one and took their punishment. Why, though? Hope looked at Eliyahu sympathetically. He loves them. Eliyahu clenched his fists. He loved our brothers. I know, Hope replied. I don't really understand it either. Eliyahu stood and turned. I'm going to check on Chivalry. Meet me outside when you're done. I don't know what's so special about these beings, Eliyahu sighed, stroking Chivalry's back. Father barely talks to me, yet he sacrificed himself for these creatures. Eliyahu laid back and rested his head on Chivalry, who slept soundly. I just don't get it, he yawned and closed his eyes. Chivalry's steady breathing gently lifted and lowered Eliyahu's head. You're so uncomfortable, he grumbled, then rolled onto his side. He let his mind wander and thought back on their last planet. That morning before they left, he had entered Hope's mind as she dreamt. Eliyahu and Hope had shared many dreams, but he had never seen anything like that. The small being resembled a human child, and the figure that entered the house made him very uneasy. Hope had never shown anyone but him that kind of affection. Eliyahu sighed. Not too long, Chivalry, and we'll be off this planet. Eliyahu woke to a pain in his stomach. He sat up slowly, his back stiff. I'm starving, he groaned. Me too, Hope thought back. I'm pretty much done. I'll be right down. Eliyahu stood and stretched. The sun was setting, and Chivalry was sitting by the door, waiting for Hope. Hey, said Eliyahu, gesturing at Chivalry. Is that why I'm stiff? You stole my pillow? The library door opened, and Hope walked out. I have so much to tell you, she said cheerfully. Eliyahu nodded slowly, glanced around the street, and noticed a small shop that might have food. Food first. Hope smiled and pulled a small folded stack of green paper from her pocket. Father said we need to use this to get food. Hello, my name is Hope, and this is my brother Eliyahu. The server smiled politely and placed some menus on the table. I'll read you the menu since you can't read, Hope said sympathetically to Eliyahu. Thanks, he agreed. The server snickered and walked away as Hope picked up a menu, opened it, and started to read the first line, then turned pale. She closed it, put it down, and stared at Eliyahu. They serve animals here, she whispered. Eliyahu looked around the room. I only see people. I mean, as food, Hope whispered. Eliyahu stood, his face twisted in horror. I'm not eating an animal, he shouted. A few heads turned to stare at them awkwardly. Shh, don't shout. They serve other things too. Eliyahu sat, his arms folded. Disgusting, he muttered, then his eyes widened. Chivalry's outside. He spun toward the door. Keep your voice down. They're not going to kidnap Chivalry. They raise animals to eat them. I read it in a book. The server returned, and Hope ordered 2 garden salads, which Eliyahu thought took an unreasonable time to prepare, and when they arrived, he commented that it was sour and wet. I thought it was lovely, Hope said, as they exited the restaurant. Eliyahu sat on a bench near where Chivalry had been waiting and stroked his head. Hope sat beside him. Where should we make camp? She asked. I don't know. It's getting late, though. We should find somewhere out of the way. Eliyahu grabbed Hope's knee and looked at her intently. Can we get one of those umbrellas? He asked. Hope laughed. Maybe tomorrow. Hey, I saw a nice place on the walk here. It had green grass, trees, and benches like this one. There was a fountain and flowers. That would be a beautiful place to camp. Eliyahu stood and stretched. Yeah, that sounds okay. Come on, Chivalry, let's get going.
The air was cool and crisp, and the sound of nighttime bugs chirping filled the night. Hope rolled out the mats, and Eliyahu gathered sticks for the fire. "I think the smoke will keep away these biting insects," he said, as he snapped one of the longer sticks. "There's not much wood around here." He arranged his pile of sticks and used his flint to light a pile of dry evergreen needles. He sat next to Hope on her mat and leaned his head on her shoulder. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks into the air. He closed his eyes and entered her mind. "I love you," he thought. He felt her smile, and she wrapped herself in his light. "What's bothering you?" Hope thought. She flipped through his thoughts like pages in a book and stopped at one. "What's this?" It was an image of her standing in a wooden room lit by firelight. She was embracing someone. She felt pain surge through Eliyahu's heart. "Hey, what's this thought?" She felt him retreat and start to build walls around his pain. He was hiding something. "Oh, no, you don't." Hope braced herself, smashed through, and gripped him. She made him look at her. She felt his despair deep within him. She tried to send him peace, but it did nothing to quell the pain he felt. "Tell me," she commanded. Eliyahu, knowing it was pointless to resist, resigned to her. "It was your dream from this morning. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." "What dream?" Hope looked at the scene, and it began to move. She saw the child, Chivalry, and a man whose face was obscured. "I don't remember this," Hope said. "You think you're going to lose me?" She felt his confirmation. Her light embraced his tightly. "Listen, Father made us a set. We're a pair. Nothing can separate us. That person in my dream was probably you." Eliyahu's heart sank. "I felt him. He didn't feel like me." Hope pressed reassurance toward him, but felt resistance. He could be so stubborn. The fire flickered, a single small flame clinging to life. "I need to get more sticks," Eliyahu said. "I'll be back." He stood and walked into the darkness. Eliyahu walked the dark, sandy path to the ocean, Chivalry trailing behind. Walls of thick vegetation pressed in on both sides, creating an almost tunnel-like trail lit only by moonlight reflecting off the water at the far end. He remembered a pile of bark and branches near those stout trees that should keep their fire going through the night. He let his mind go blank and breathed in the cool air. He was too tired to ruminate and knew from experience it wouldn't do any good anyway. He knew what was true, what Hope had said. He would not lose her. But he knew what he felt, and those things did not match. He reached the end of the trail and stepped onto the beach. It was a beautiful night, the stars bright in the sky and the sound of waves crashing on the shore. He wondered how many of those stars he had visited, how many he had left, and if he would ever get the chance to see the rest. He bent down and picked up an armful of sticks and dried palm branches. "This would have been a nice place to camp. Let's camp here tomorrow." "Okay, let's go back, Chivalry. We don't want Hope to worry." After a few steps, he heard a faint voice in his mind. It was too quiet and muffled to understand. Hope? He reached out and found her, but her light was dim. "What's the matter?" He pressed the thought to her. She was talking, but not to him, and he couldn't make out the words, but she was concerned. "Something's wrong with Hope. Chivalry, let's run!" Blue lights pulsed in the distance, near their camp. A sharp cry pierced the night. It was Hope's voice. Eliyahu ran faster, desperation driving him as he pressed his thoughts to her, but she didn't answer. His heart thundered as fear gripped him, yet he refused to let it distract him. He focused. Only one thing mattered: reaching Hope. The rhythm of his footfalls and the blood roaring in his veins consumed him. He willed them faster. He banished all thoughts but one. "Faster!" Another anguished cry echoed from the distance, thick with struggle. He glimpsed 3 figures. One was Hope, her white robe flickering in and out of sight as the pulsing blue light bathed the scene. The other 2, dressed in black, loomed like fallen ones.
The lights vanished and Hope was gone. Eliyahu's breath caught, but he surged forward. "What's happening?" He flung the thought to her, his mind screaming. Still, silence. A car's lights turned on where Hope had stood and began to drive away. "Hope!" Eliyahu's scream tore through the night. He was almost there. "Hope!" He reached the spot, empty, no trace of her. He stumbled to their camp, heart lurching. She was gone. He fell to his knees and covered his face with his hands. His mind was spinning, his thoughts unintelligible. He sat paralyzed. Chivalry's cold, wet nose pressed against Eliyahu's cheek. Hours had slipped by in the quiet dark. Morning had come, and Eliyahu sat, staring at his hands, only vaguely aware of the dog's pleas over the past few hours. His racing thoughts had ceased, leaving only stillness. One thought remained. My life is over. It wasn't a sad thought, it was just a fact. The problem was, he was immortal. His mind was trapped in a body that could not die, a living death. He searched for Hope, but her light was nowhere to be found. He cried out to her, but she did not respond. She was gone, and he was alone, just as he had predicted. In the back of his mind, he had always known it would end this way. He asked Father to kill him, but Father didn't answer. Eliyahu stood and looked around. The sun was rising. He wanted to find a place to lie down and never get up again, somewhere no one would disturb his body. Maybe he would swim out into the ocean, sink to the bottom, and drift along the ocean floor for all eternity. That sounded nice. Eliyahu walked down the street, unfazed by the cars speeding past him. He wondered what it would feel like if one hit him. Probably better than how he felt now. Although, it might make it hard to reach the ocean, and he needed rest. He closed his eyes and imagined it. The cold embrace of the deep ocean, the silence, the gentle current. Peace. He entered the sandy path. Up ahead lay the pile of sticks he had dropped the night before. He thought of lighting it and tossing it into the brush. He would burn this whole world down. He hated these humans. He imagined flames spreading across the land, homes burning, people screaming. He smiled. It was a nice thought, but no, he would not turn on Father. He wasn't that foolish, not like these humans. Maybe Father would avenge him, at least for Hope's sake. He stopped as the waves brushed his feet and turned to Chivalry, who stood solemnly beside him. "I'm going away, Chivalry. You need to find a new home." Tears streamed down his face, and his head began to throb. "You were a good dog, a good friend." He started forward, then heard a voice behind him. Startled, he turned. It was Bracha. "Hey, are you okay? You don't look that good," the girl said. "Bracha?" Eliyahu wiped his face and squinted at her. She looked as confused as he felt. "What are you doing here? Did Father send you? Hope is in trouble." Who's Bracha? Who's Hope?" the girl said cautiously. Why was this happening to him? He didn't have time to deal with this. "Never mind, Bracha. I have to go now," Eliyahu said slowly as he turned back to the ocean. The waves called to him. "Is Hope out there?" Bracha asked. Eliyahu rolled his eyes. "No." "Then why aren't you helping her?" she pressed. "Because I have no idea where she is. She could be on the other side of this planet for all I know, and I don't have the scroll. Even if I did, it wouldn't work. She's gone." Eliyahu took a deep breath and stepped forward. "What happened to her?" Bracha insisted. He couldn't believe this. Couldn't she tell he was busy? Eliyahu sighed. "She was taken by dark figures in a car with blue flashing lights, okay? Now, if you would be so kind, I have things to do." A wave crashed against his knees and the sand shifted beneath his feet. This was it. He took another step. "She's not on the other side of the world," said Bracha. "She's at the police station right here in town. Why don't you go see her?" Eliyahu frowned and turned to look at her. "The what station?" Bracha reached out her hand. "Hey, why don't you come out of there? I'm getting wet. We can talk about this. I'll take you to see Hope." "Why do you call me Bracha?" Bracha said. Eliyahu rubbed his temples. Because your name is Bracha. It's actually Laurel, the girl said. Eliyahu shook his head slowly. It's Bracha. I don't know why you don't know that, or why you don't know Hope, and I don't particularly care at this point. But if you know what happened to her, just tell me. Well, Bracha said, it sounds like she got arrested. What's that? Eliyahu asked tiredly. Bracha hesitated. I work in a psychiatric hospital, so I have some experience with people like yourself. Have you spent time in a hospital recently? She asked. Eliyahu shook his head. Not recently. I was a medic in a war, but that was a long time ago. Ah, that explains a lot. Okay, I'll take you to the police station, and we'll see if we can get Hope out of there, okay? Eliyahu wasn't in the mood for conversation. He was exhausted, and his head was pounding. But Bracha insisted on telling him about her job at the hospital. She was on the cleaning staff and worked nights, which she said worked out perfectly because she took classes during the day. Her dream was to help people overcome mental issues like his, and when she graduated, she could easily get a job at the hospital, as she knew so many people. She continued to talk, and Eliyahu kept trying to block out her voice with little success. Bracha put her hand on his shoulder. I think Hope is going to be okay. It's probably just a misunderstanding. Eliyahu nodded and gave her a faint smile. They entered the police station and walked up to the front counter. The room was divided by a wooden wall with hazy windows. A stern woman sat glaring at them through the cloudy glass. Excuse me, Bracha said. We're looking for a girl who may have been brought in last night. Her name is Hope. The woman frowned and shuffled some papers on her desk. The crazy one? Yeah, here it is, she said. She pulled a piece of paper, placed it on top of the stack, and read it slowly. She was brought in for illegal camping. Says here she refused to leave and was acting irrationally. And she's currently being held for psychiatric evaluation. No visitors. The woman set the stack of papers down, looked up, and stared blankly at Bracha. Can I help you with something else? Frustration and rage surged through Eliyahu's veins. He stepped forward. You need to release her now, he shouted. The woman leaped to her feet, her face twisted in anger. Bracha stepped in front of him and raised her hands soothingly. Sorry about him. He has PTSD. We were just wondering when we could see Hope. The woman snorted and looked Eliyahu over. A vet, huh? Well, I'll let you behave your slide this time, but keep it civil. She jabbed her finger in Eliyahu's direction. No visitors until the evaluation is done. Come back in a week. They left the police station. Eliyahu's head hung in defeat. How can I live without her for a week? Listen, Bracha said, her face full of sympathy. I'm really sorry about what you're going through. I want to help you, but I have to get to class. Will you be okay by yourself? Can we meet next week? Eliyahu, not looking up, gave a slight nod. Where should we meet? Bracha asked. The beach, Eliyahu answered. Bracha squeezed his shoulder reassuringly, turned, and jogged down the sidewalk. Chivalry came up beside him and sat down. What am I supposed to do now? Eliyahu asked. Eliyahu stood on the beach, facing the stout tree they had first spotted when they arrived on this cursed planet. He raised his hand and felt the ridges on the bark. Hope had placed her hand on this very spot. He rested his face against the tree and wept, then picked up Hope's sack and walked past the group of trees to the wall of vegetation, crouched down, and pushed his way in. It was dark and thick, with sticks jabbing him from all sides. He cleared a spot in the wet earth, folded back branches and leaves, and created a small dome. He rolled out Hope's mat and curled up on it, then pressed his nose against it and breathed deeply. It still smelled like her, but he knew the scent would fade. He would get her back before that happened. Chivalry whined from outside, but Eliyahu took no notice. All that was left of him was a shell, once filled with Hope's light. He was nothing without her, worthless. He closed his eyes and looked for her, but there was only darkness. Father, save her. He listened for a response. Nothing. Eliyahu rolled over on his mat, wincing as his joints creaked. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "Good morning," he whispered. A week had passed without Eliyahu leaving his hole, neither eating nor drinking and barely sleeping. It was the morning he would meet Bracha and possibly see Hope. He would not risk getting his hopes up, but if he did get her back, they would leave this place and find somewhere safe until Father let them leave this planet. "I know, it's time to get up. Got a busy day today." Eliyahu crawled out from his dome of vegetation, stood and stretched. He looked around. Chivalry was nowhere to be seen. He looked down and inspected his robe. He was covered head to toe in dirt stains. "I can't see Hope like this," he said. "I should wash off." He walked down the beach and waded into the water, the salty waves crashing against his chest, cleansing his garment. He submerged his head and scrubbed the dirt from his hair. He stood and looked to his left. Hope stood beside him and smiled. He smiled back. "I love you," he said. He felt her warmth. "I love you too." Then she was gone. He knew she wasn't real, a construct of his broken mind, but he didn't care. This construct was the glue holding together the broken pieces of his soul. He lifted his face to the sky and felt the cool breeze against his skin. He smiled. "Hey, what are you doing?" A shout came from behind him. It was Bracha. "Just rinsing off," Eliyahu shouted back. "Oh, good! Phew!" Bracha staggered to the shoreline, out of breath. "I saw you in the water and I ran over. Why don't you step away from there and we can sit and talk? I have some things to tell you." Chapter 8. The Beach. Eliyahu unrolled his extra mat in the sand under the shade of the palm trees and sat down. Bracha sat next to him. "Okay, don't freak out, but Hope's evaluation was completed yesterday and she was moved to the psychiatric hospital where I work." She paused, trying to gauge Eliyahu's reaction. "What does that mean? Can I see her?" he said slowly. "Here's the thing, it gets worse. They're saying they found signs of psychological abuse. They're calling it human trafficking." Bracha studied him carefully. "What's that?" Eliyahu asked, his eyebrows knit. "It's where bad people take other people and do bad things to them." Eliyahu gritted his teeth, rage creeping through his body. "What bad things did they do to her?" he growled. "No, no," Bracha shook her head. "They're accusing you of doing bad things." Eliyahu's eyes widened in disbelief. "Listen, I know you'd never hurt her, trust me. If I thought you were dangerous, I wouldn't be here." Eliyahu stared at his hands as Bracha continued. "I overheard some nurses talking. She's not doing well. They said she was screaming for you." Her brother? But they checked her ID and found she doesn't have a brother. They couldn't find any record of you. Do you know what they're talking about?" Eliyahu shook his head slowly. "Well, last night I found her room and listened at her door. She was crying. I'm really sorry. I'm not sure what to tell you." Eliyahu couldn't believe the irony. "They abducted her, tortured her, and are blaming me?" He stood and clenched his fists. "Father, burn this world to ashes," he whispered. "Listen, she's in good hands. They can help her," Bracha said soothingly. Eliyahu turned and stared at her in bewilderment. "Help her? What do you mean, help her? She didn't need help before they took her," he said, his voice rising. Okay, I believe you," Bracha said, taking a step back. "Just leave," he yelled. "If you're on their side, just get out of here." Eliyahu turned away and started down the beach. Eliyahu sat in the wet sand and stared out over the ocean, an occasional wave washing over his feet and leaving a layer of sea foam as it receded. He had been waiting for this day for a week. He believed with all that he had that he would get Hope back today. "I love you. I can't do this without you," he whispered, then turned and looked at Hope sitting beside him. She had scooped up some sea foam with both hands and held it out to him, smiling. He hadn't just lost her, he had lost the best of himself. "I will get you back," he thought to her. Hope smiled, then was gone. Father, why did you give her to me just to take her away? Eliyahu lowered his head and buried his face in his hands. I know you. You're not cruel. I don't understand you, but you're not cruel. He knew Father could speak to him if he wanted, but it had been a very long time. He knew the problem was with himself, something he was thinking, some belief he held was wrong and was preventing him from hearing. He had known this a long time, but was too afraid to face it. Okay, fine, let me have it. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. He waited, then opened himself to an answer he didn't want to hear. He slowed his breathing and embraced the stillness. Minutes passed, but he resolved himself to sit in this stillness until he had an answer. Slowly, a vague concept began to enter his mind. It was fuzzy, but he narrowed in, focusing. It started to take shape until it became recognizable. What? I depend on her too much? Eliyahu scoffed. We depend on each other. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, I know she talks to you all the time. I'm not sure why I don't. Maybe because you don't talk back. He paused, then thought about what he had said. Was that really true? Another thought started to form, this time clearer. I do talk back. You just don't want to hear. The realization that Father was actually speaking to him made Eliyahu freeze. Hesitantly, afraid to break the connection, he continued. Okay, you've got my attention. What do you want from me? A pause, then, I want what's best for you, Father said. Eliyahu laughed. And what's that? Me, Father responded. You? Eliyahu pondered this for a moment. Okay, what do I have to do? He felt Father's smile. Not just to get her back. Father seemed to know him better than he knew himself. Eliyahu realized he'd been willing to play along with Father to get Hope back, but there was no deceiving him. I'm sorry, he said. I just don't know how to do that. How do I get you? Give her up, Father said quietly. What? No! Eliyahu was outraged. Why would I do that? You gave her to me. You wouldn't ask me to do that. Father paused, letting Eliyahu's words echo in his mind. Trust me, Father whispered. Eliyahu shook his head. No, I won't betray her. I'd rather die, he exclaimed. I'm not asking you to betray her. Give me your love for her, and I'll replace it with mine. You already gave me your love for her. That's why I love her in the first place, Eliyahu shouted. He felt Father smile sadly at him. Yes, but your love was tainted by your lack. Eliyahu sighed. What does that mean? It means there's a void in you that needs to be filled, and you're using her to fill it. Eliyahu laid back in the sand and looked up at the sky. The sand was warm and the breeze cool. He closed his eyes and listened to the gulls overhead. How did he use hope to fill a void? Isn't that the nature of relationships? We all have lack, we all have weaknesses, and we give each other strength where they're weak. He felt this was a good answer and was curious how Father would respond. None of Father's children were perfect, only Father was. Do you think that's how I love you? Father asked. No, but you're Father, Eliyahu replied. And you're my son, Father said slowly, then asked, how do you think Hope deserves to be loved? Eliyahu knew Hope deserved his best. But doesn't she want to be needed? Eliyahu felt a concept enter his mind. It was complex, and he needed to think about it. There are different types of needs, a need to give and bless, and a need to take and be blessed. He considered this for a moment. She deserves more from me, Eliyahu sighed. He needed to be more like Father. He thought back on when Father first gave him his love for Hope. It was pure. He remembered what Hope had said that first time they really spoke. She said, I think Father gave us himself, as a gift. She was right, but over time his own self-doubt had strangled that pure love and replaced it with something else. He felt shame. I've ruined everything, haven't I? He felt Father's smile, and it embraced him. For a brief instant, he sensed what Father felt. A love for his children so deep and powerful, a need to love them, to care for them, to encourage and bless them. "I'm proud of you," Father whispered. "Let me complete you." Eliyahu wiped the tears from his face. "I want that, I just don't know how." But he did know how, he just knew it wouldn't be easy, and it would hurt. "Give her to me," Father continued. "Trust me, place her at my feet." Eliyahu saw a blue light flicker in front of him. "Hope!" he sobbed. She was faint but pulsed slowly. He cupped his shaking hands around her. She was warm. He tried desperately to join with her, to enter her thoughts. He needed to know if she was okay, to tell her he'd stop at nothing to get her back, but he couldn't find a way in. She was silent. He held her in his hands and pressed his face against her warm, pulsing light. Tears dripped onto his palms. The weight fell upon him, and Eliyahu gasped. He stood in a sea of clouds. Father's throne stood before him, and Hope's light still pulsed in his hands. "Place her at my feet," Father said. Eliyahu looked down at her and began to sob. "Father, it's too hard." "I know, my son." She was everything to him, his whole identity. Father was asking the impossible. To give her up was to destroy himself in the worst way imaginable. Through gritted teeth, he managed to stagger forward, his arms outstretched. It was like cutting out his own heart as he leaned forward and placed her at the foot of Father's throne. Hope's light began to pulse brighter and stronger, then floated up and joined with Father. The loss he felt was profound, as if everything good in creation was gone, destroyed in a single moment. He never knew an emptiness like this could exist. He collapsed in the sand and was still. Eliyahu stared up at his canopy of twisted branches. Over the past few weeks, a pair of birds had built a nest above him. He had no motivation to move his camp and lacked the heart to evict his new roommates. He felt as though Father was intentionally torturing him with this happy pair of carefree creatures. He frowned up at one of the birds perched on a stick above him. "Life is cruel. One day you'll lose her, and your heart will break," Eliyahu sighed. He felt Father's presence correct him. I know. There's a reason all this is happening," Eliyahu said. Then Father spoke. "Time to stop feeling sorry for yourself. Let's go for a walk." Eliyahu groaned. He did not want to leave his den. He buried his face in Hope's mat. "Fine, I'll go on a walk." He rolled over, crawled out of his leafy dome, and stepped onto the beach. It was early morning, and the shore was scattered with humans walking or standing, waiting for the sun to rise. The sunrise over the ocean was a beautiful sight, or would have been, if not marred by the presence of humans. "You know that I love them, don't you?" Father whispered. "You know I know you love them," Eliyahu responded. He walked in the wet sand waves washing over his bare feet. "Who are you?" Father asked. What did Father mean? Who am I? Eliyahu reflected on this. "I'm your son." He felt Father's peace wash over him. "And what does that mean to you?" Father asked. What did it mean to him? It meant Father loved him. He knew what Father was getting at. He knew Father loved him in his head, but he didn't feel it in his heart, not really. "Tell me how I feel about you," Father urged. Eliyahu frowned. He didn't really want to talk about this. He knew that out of all Father's creation, he was the most worthless. But Father, ignoring this last thought, continued. "I'll show you, then you describe it to me." It started off faint, a feeling, a concept, he wasn't sure. Eliyahu explored it, circling it in his mind. It was foreign and made him uneasy. He paused, then tried to describe it. "It's like, you don't just love me, you like me?" He let the thought wash over him, then continued. "You're excited about me? And you're proud of me?" Eliyahu looked down, embarrassed. "Why are you embarrassed?" Father smiled. "Don't you know how much I love you?" Eliyahu wiped tears from his face. "I don't deserve that," he said. Father laughed. "That's not the point.
I made you, and I love you. I made you bold and fearless, loyal and steadfast, compassionate, and a defender of the weak. Father paused. I want you to see yourself how I see you. Eliyahu laughed skeptically. How could he see himself that way? It was one thing if Father did. Father could do whatever he wanted. Father responded with another concept. Eliyahu unpacked it. Whatever you believe is truth. So, if I believe something different from what you do, I am believing a lie, and saying you are wrong. He felt Father's confirmation. I made you, and I'm proud of my work. Once you accept that, we can move to the next step. Is the next step getting Hope back? Eliyahu asked. Silence. Then, turn around and walk back, Father responded. Okay, but that's not an answer. Eliyahu turned around and started back toward his camp. It's been 4 weeks since I've heard from Hope. I feel so empty, and I don't know if she's okay or if she's hurt. I don't know how much longer I can take this, Eliyahu sighed. Father didn't respond. Dark clouds covered the sun, and the soft breeze turned to a strong wind. Beachgoers started to hastily pack up their belongings and make their way to the paths exiting the beach. Eliyahu didn't mind the rain, but hated how the water pooled around his mat, soaking it through and making the nights long and miserable. I wish I had an umbrella. His thoughts went to Hope. Maybe tomorrow, she told me, but we never got that tomorrow. The rain came down hard, and he was alone on the beach. That was one good thing about the rain. The humans scattered. They swim in the water but run for cover when it falls from the sky. Eliyahu shook his head. He looked up and noticed a figure sitting in the sand ahead. This human isn't afraid, he huffed. He walked slowly, heading more inland to avoid getting too close to the crouching human. Walk faster, Father said. Faster? Why? Eliyahu responded. No answer. He picked up his pace. Toward her, Father said. Eliyahu looked at the human. Father, you know how I feel about them. They took Hope from me, and the one I thought I could trust betrayed me. No response. Fine, I'll walk toward her. As he got nearer, the shape came into focus. The girl looked up and met his gaze through the torrent of rain. It was Braca. Eliyahu sneered. Father? Go to her. Eliyahu bit his lip and walked forward. As he got closer, he saw she was cradling her foot, blood gushing from between her clasped hands. Eliyahu stopped and stared at her. What do you want me to do about this? I love this one, Father said. Eliyahu felt Father's pain rake through his heart, causing tears to well up in his eyes. You want me to help her? I have my own problems. What about Hope? I love Hope. She's in pain too. And this one thinks she's better off with her friends. Eliyahu paused. Father was silent. Fine, I'll help her. Eliyahu bent over Braca and looked at her bleeding foot. The wound bled profusely, despite being held closed with both her hands. A large shard of glass lay near her foot in the blood-soaked sand. Braca looked up. Though her face was wet from the rain, he could tell she had been crying. Let go of your foot and lie back, Eliyahu sighed. Braca's expression was wrought with panic. I'm a medic, remember? Eliyahu took hold of her foot, prying it from her grip. Braca yelped, relented, lay back, covered her face with her blood-soaked hands, and began to sob. The wound was deep and long. It would not heal on its own any time soon. What do you want me to do? Heal her, Father said. Eliyahu gripped the wound and muttered his prayer. His eyes were closed, but he felt the familiar warmth of the blue light as it surrounded the wound. Yet something felt different, unfamiliar. Father, what's this? She is human, Father responded. Thoughts started to enter Eliyahu's mind. She was a spiritual being living in a corporeal body, unlike celestials, who were spiritual beings living in a spiritual body that had physical form.
When a celestial was wounded, it was a spiritual wound that manifested in their physical body. I don't know how to heal this. It's completely different. Bracha started to squirm. Stay still, Eliyahu commanded. I'll teach you, Father said. Eliyahu repeated after Father, and a red glow appeared around Bracha's wound. Bracha screamed. It felt really strange. It didn't hurt, it just felt like my skin was being knitted back together, Bracha said, massaging the sole of her foot. The storm had mostly cleared as they took shelter under the group of palm trees that partially protected them from the now light rain. So, how did you do it? Bracha asked. It's not me who does it, it's Father. He just partners with us. Or, that's how I was taught anyway. Eliyahu stood and brushed the sand from his backside. Well, if you're feeling better— Who is Father? Bracha interrupted. Is that like God? Eliyahu stared blankly at Bracha, whose eyes were bright with curiosity. I don't know who God is. He's just Father. Anyway, it's getting late. Eliyahu felt a surge of excitement. Tell her about me, Father told him. What, now? Eliyahu thought. Father didn't respond, but he could still feel his excitement. Eliyahu frowned. Father created all of this. He gestured around them. He created your race as well. Why? I'm not sure. Bracha gave Eliyahu a confused look. What do you mean by your race? What race are you? You know, Tell her what I did for her, Father interrupted. Eliyahu paused. That was the third time he'd been interrupted. He remembered at the library when he'd entered Hope's mind and seen what Father had done for this race. But how to word it? Where I come from, there was a rebellion against Father. There was a long war, and the rebels were defeated and cast down. After that, Father decided to create your race. You rebelled too, but instead of casting you down, he became one of you and paid your debt. Bracha's eyes widened. You're talking about Jesus. Eliyahu squinted. I've been gone a while. Remember, Father whispered. Eliyahu paused, then closed his eyes. Yes, Jesus is what he was called. Are you an angel? Bracha said, bewildered. Eliyahu glanced at the entrance to his den. She probably wouldn't follow him if he disappeared into the bushes. Although she could wait at the entrance and he'd be trapped, which would be kind of embarrassing. He looked back at Bracha. No, I'm not an angel. I know a few angels, but I'm a celestial. Bracha tapped her chin. So you said our race rebelled and Father paid our debt. What does that mean for me? Is my debt paid? Eliyahu frowned, then closed his eyes and tried to remember. It seemed some humans were forgiven and others were not. Perhaps they had to renounce the rebels and swear allegiance to Father. He thought about this for a second, then decided it was a good enough explanation. You just need to renounce the rebels and your rebel ways. Then swear allegiance to Father and give your life to him. He felt Father smile in confirmation. Okay, I'll do it. Bracha leaped up, beaming and clasping her hands together. Really? Eliyahu said, astonished. Chapter 9. The Prison. Eliyahu reclined his beach chair and held up his picture of Hope that Bracha had brought him. Hope was sitting next to an orderly on a sofa in the hospital's common area. She was smiling. The first time he saw that photo, it shook him. Why was she smiling? He asked Father about it, but he didn't answer. Eliyahu held the photo to his chest and stared up at the underside of his umbrella. Bracha had brought him a few supplies, but Eliyahu had a hard time enjoying them. She offered to let him sleep on her couch, excited at the prospect of having a real angel staying at her apartment. But Eliyahu said he needed solitude, though that didn't stop her from visiting daily with Chivalry, who had apparently moved in with her. Eliyahu, at first offended, realized he hadn't been a good companion, neglecting to feed and provide shelter for his canine friend. This was just temporary. Soon they would all be together again. Eliyahu took a deep breath and sighed. Father, what do you want me to do? No answer. maybe because he already knew the answer. The day he healed Braca, after they talked about father, she remembered the reason she had come. There was a warrant out for his arrest, and she came to warn him. If they caught him, he'd be locked up and would never see Hope again. But for some reason, a voice kept telling him to turn himself in. Sometimes he had a hard time telling the difference between father's voice and random thoughts. Nothing good could come from turning himself in. That was a ridiculous thought. Even Braca said it was better if he stayed out of sight. Working nights, Braca hadn't had the chance to speak with Hope, but learned from some nurses that she was doing well and adjusting to her new home. Eliyahu was torn. He didn't want Hope to suffer, but it felt like a betrayal. Was she happy because she was growing closer to father through this trial? Or was she happy because she had let him go and moved on with her life? Braca learned that one of the orderlies had taken her under his wing, and they were forming a real bond. Eliyahu lifted the photo, looked at the man sitting next to Hope, and huffed. The guy looked like a loser to him. Chivalry, sprinting down the beach, came to a halt beside Eliyahu, put his paws on his chest, and started frantically licking his face. Eliyahu grimaced and scratched behind the dog's ears. "Hey, buddy!" He was glad his neglect hadn't ruined their friendship. Eliyahu looked up to see Braca not far behind. Did she truly care about him and Hope, or were they just novelties to her? His conscience smote him. Father loved this girl and deemed her worthy, and he should acknowledge that. Braca put down a basket and unfolded her chair next to his. "Good morning," she said brightly. She sat cross-legged, facing him. "I wanted to ask you something." Eliyahu had mixed feelings about Braca's newfound faith in father. He could feel father's joy when she talked about him or shared something from his scroll, but he felt everyone was forgetting about getting Hope back. Everyone seemed to be moving on except him. He had given Hope to father and trusted him to do what was right. But he knew this was not sustainable. Eliyahu lay back and looked up at his umbrella. "What's your question?" he said tiredly. Unfazed by his lack of interest, Braca smiled and asked, "How exactly do you talk to father? I mean, I pray to him, but he doesn't ever talk back." Eliyahu closed his eyes. "I don't think humans can talk to father." Braca's eyes widened. "Oh, that reminds me of something I read." She pulled out father's scroll from her basket and opened it on her lap. On the 6th day of creation it says, "God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life." The breath of life is his spirit, right? Just like you. Eliyahu frowned. "No, that's different." Braca tapped her chin. Hear me out for a second. You call me Braca, even though that's not my name. But you said you knew me, and I was friends with Hope, and that I was a celestial like you. What if humans are celestials, or rather, celestials are the eternal spirits of humans? Eliyahu shook his head as she spoke. No, that's not possible." Braca paused and looked intently at him. "Are you sure? Were you there?" Eliyahu grimaced. He wasn't there. He'd missed that day. He also missed the ceremony of the Celestials, where they were to receive their assignments related to Earth. Could she be right? No, humans were a replacement for them, Father's new, cherished race. He felt a twinge of sorrow and heard a whisper, "You are cherished." Eliyahu winced. It was time to change the subject. He sat up and faced Braca. "Okay, so you want to talk to father?" Eliyahu asked dryly. "It took me over 6,000 years to learn this, so you probably won't get the hang of it in your lifetime. So don't feel bad if it doesn't work." Braca steeled herself and nodded. Eliyahu continued. "The most important thing is a willingness to obey what he says. If you ask, 'What should I do?' but will only obey if he tells you what you want to hear, chances are you won't hear anything. Second, if you're believing wrong thoughts about him, yourself, or someone else, he'll want to address those first. For example, if you believe he doesn't love you, or you're on your own, or you can only depend on yourself, or he doesn't have your best interest in mind, or if you have any other rebel-like thoughts, you need to ask him to show you those and remove them. Got it? The last thing is, you need to familiarize yourself with his personality.
Since you've never met Father in person, I'd start with his scroll. There's probably some good stuff in there." Eliyahu nodded thoughtfully. "That's all I can think of right now, but work on that for a few thousand years and get back to me. I should have more advice by then." Bracha smiled. "Okay, got it. Let me try." Eliyahu frowned and shook his head slowly. "No, it'll take—"
"He's talking to me!" Bracha exclaimed. She spoke slowly. "Tell Eliyahu to trust me." A week had passed, and Eliyahu was now certain what Father wanted him to do. He wanted him to trust him. Turning himself into these humans would be humiliating. They had no right to judge him. He should be the one judging them. They rebelled against Father and were tormenting his children. But Father said to trust him, so that's what he would do, even if it meant being locked up. Father had a plan, and Eliyahu knew it was likely better than any plan he could devise. He patted Chivalry's head. "I'm not sure when I'll see you again, but you'll be okay with Bracha. She'll take good care of you." "I sure will," Bracha smiled. Eliyahu stood and folded up his chair. "Will you keep my umbrella safe?" Bracha nodded solemnly. Eliyahu took one last glance at the ocean and turned toward the trail. "I'm ready." Eliyahu opened the door to the police station and walked in. The woman behind the glass glanced up at him as he approached. She squinted, as if trying to recall if she'd seen him before. Eliyahu felt a wave of oppression, as if darkness was closing around him, and a chill ran up his spine. This place was evil. He could feel it. He stopped at the glass and looked at the woman. This was it, his last chance to back out. But it was no use. He knew this was where Father wanted him. "My name is Eliyahu, and I'm here to turn myself in." The woman pointed to a metal seat in the corner and told him to sit down. Someone would be out shortly. Eliyahu sat. The seat was cold. The room was cold. Why did they keep it so cold in here? He closed his eyes. "Father, what do I do now?" Father whispered back. "I'm with you. Open your eyes." Eliyahu opened his eyes and looked around the room. It was a dreary place. A cold stone floor, faded wood-paneled walls, thick metal doors with barred windows. Of countless planets Eliyahu had seen, this was the most miserable place he'd ever been. "Open your eyes," Father repeated. A thought dawned on him. He blinked, then blinked again. Creatures filled the room. Small, grotesque, dark beings scampered to and fro. Some hung from the walls, looking down at him with big, toothy grins. He looked to his right, and there stood an angel with arms folded, looking straight ahead. Eliyahu looked at the nearest creature, sitting 4 paces in front of him. Its mouth was ajar, and its breath was loud and raspy, its tongue lolling with a long strand of drool connecting it to the floor. It sucked its tongue back in with a slurping sound, spraying a trail of sticky saliva across the floor in front of it. Eliyahu shuddered. What were these things? They looked like deformed, naked, dwarven fallen ones, with wisps of black smoke seeping from their pores. A door to his right opened, and a woman stepped out, wearing all black with a silver emblem on her chest. Eliyahu stood as she approached, but movement at his feet caught his attention. The creature in front of him turned toward the woman and leaped at her, then vanished inside her, others following suit, but the woman didn't seem to notice. Dark faces began to emerge from the woman, covering her entire body. The faces grinned at him, some licking their sharp, jagged teeth, some wagging their tongues.
"Spread your feet and lift your arms,"
the woman commanded, her voice low and gravelly. The creature, whose face covered hers like a mask, moved its mouth as she spoke. Eliyahu glanced at the angel, whose gaze was fixed straight ahead, then back at the woman. He had no choice but to comply. He spread his feet and raised his arms. The woman bent down, starting at his ankles, and began to grab and feel up his entire body. Eliyahu gritted his teeth and looked down at a face protruding from the woman's back. "You're going to pay for this," he breathed. When the woman finished her violating assault, she looked at him, grinned, then ordered him to turn around and put his hands behind his back.
Eliyahu's gut twisted with humiliation and fury as she shackled his hands tightly together and led him by the shoulder to a door across the room. The door buzzed, then clicked. She opened it and led him through. The angel followed, creatures scampering out of its way, his expression unreadable. They waited by a second door. Eliyahu stared at his feet. The sight of those faces filled him with dread. What were these things? Some new evil race, spawned by the fallen? Eliyahu bit his lip and looked up. Over 50 faces peered out from the woman's body. He shuddered, then looked to the angel. The angel turned to him suddenly, raised his eyebrows, and cocked his head. Their eyes met briefly, then the second door buzzed, and the woman yanked his shoulder, turning him toward the door, opened it, and let him in. The next room was large and lined with cells. Prisoners shouted taunts and profanities from their cells as the dark creatures cackled and leaped from one prisoner to another. A boxed-in counter stood in the middle of the room, and 3 men stood behind it, partially obscured by grimy glass windows. A 4th man stood in front of the counter and looked greedily at Eliyahu. A single dark face emerged from his, cloaked in darkness. Eliyahu's hair stood on end as he felt it smile at him. The woman leading him stopped in front of the man and bowed slightly.
Uncuff him,
the 4th man said. She obeyed, unlocking his shackles, then departed the way she had come. The 4th man looked intently at him. Eliyahu raised his head and met the creature's gaze defiantly.
Remove your robe,
the man snarled. Eliyahu clenched his jaw and pulled off his robe. The prisoners screamed and laughed from their cells. Father, he thought. Be calm, I'm with you, Father replied. The man grabbed the robe from Eliyahu's hand and started to inspect it thoroughly, checking the pockets and seams. He pulled out Eliyahu's ID, handed it and the robe to a man behind the counter.
Spread your feet and raise your arms,
the man said. Eliyahu took a deep breath and complied.
Focus on me,
Father whispered. Eliyahu closed his eyes. Why am I here? Eliyahu thought. You're here because you're my son. I once stood before men like these. I was once shackled and disrobed, falsely accused and humiliated. It's a rare gift to share in my suffering. But you're also here to bring my judgment on my enemies. The man behind the counter tossed Eliyahu his robe.
Put it on,
he snapped. I feel disgusting, defiled, Eliyahu thought. I know, but you won't always feel this way, Father said. The 4th man strapped a thick leather band around Eliyahu's waist, shackled his hands to it, then led him to a side room. It was a large open cell, the walls lined with metal benches and bodies wrapped in white sheets. The man slammed the door shut and left him standing alone. Eliyahu looked at the bodies. Are they dead? No, asleep, Father whispered. Eliyahu paused and glanced around the room. This day was getting progressively worse. He walked to the far wall, sat down between 2 bodies, and closed his eyes. He pictured himself, his translucent, iridescent light. He pictured Father, much larger, brighter, and warmer. He approached cautiously, then felt Father welcome him. He immersed himself, Father wrapping himself around him, and Eliyahu began to weep.
Eliyahu,
a voice said from the barred door. Eliyahu opened his eyes and stood. The voice called out again. It was a guard. Eliyahu approached as the guard held up a piece of paper to the bars.
You're being accused of human trafficking and kidnapping a young woman. You'll see a judge shortly.
The prisoners in the room behind the guard started a riotous commotion, shaking their bars and yelling about Eliyahu. The guard tossed the paper through the bars onto the ground, then turned and left. The angel, who had been standing outside the door, turned and faced Eliyahu, walked forward, and passed through the bars into the cell. I wish I could do that, Eliyahu said. The angel smiled. I hadn't realized you could see me. Most celestials can't view this realm. Eliyahu looked around the room. The bodies under the sheets still appeared to be sleeping. "I've had a lot of practice," Eliyahu said.
I'd love to hear your story one day. You and Hope are well loved, and your illustrations bring Father's kingdom immense joy.
Eliyahu bit his lip. He hadn't thought about that in a long time. He always wondered if they were really doing any good. His eyes filled with tears. I'm glad they helped."
"They did," the angel said. "But I'm here for a different reason. Today is a big day. I command a legion of angels in this territory, and we've had our eye on this jail for a while. It's crawling with demons and fallen ones. We want to clean it out." Eliyahu looked at the angel intently. "Demons?"
Ah, yes. You don't know about those. I can explain later.
I need you to ask Father to arm us and send us in." Eliyahu frowned. "Why me?" The angel gave him a wide grin. "That's just how Father likes to do it. He partners with men who pray for His will, then He sends us to do the fun part. We angels definitely have the best job." Eliyahu glared at the angel. "I'm not a man." The angel smirked and ruffled Eliyahu's hair. "It's okay. A boy will do just fine." Eliyahu gripped the bars of his cell, smiling as he remembered the cell on Ma'adim, his and Hope's first planet, where the bars had turned to blades. He looked out into the cell block. Demons leaped from cell to cell, causing chaos. Guards walked the perimeter of the room, faces peering out from their bodies. The guards shouted at the prisoners as the faces howled. The shrieks and laughter of the demons were ear-piercing.
"Eliyahu," a guard called out as he approached the cell door. "Step back."
The angel put his hand on Eliyahu's shoulder. "Quickly," he commanded. Eliyahu bowed his head and quickly uttered, "Father, we claim this territory in your name. Please arm your angels and wreak havoc on this enemy stronghold. Lay waste to these demons and their fallen masters, and free the guards and prisoners from their control." Eliyahu looked up in time to see the guard's baton come down on his fingers. He gasped, stumbled back, and clutched his hand. A dark face cackled from the guard's head. Then, from over Eliyahu's shoulder, a shimmering, translucent golden sword thrust into the guard's face, yanking out a limp demon. The angel flicked his sword to the side, and the demon tumbled to the floor. He winked at Eliyahu and ran through the wall. The guard stood looking dazed. "Oh man, your hand! That was an accident. Shoot, I might have to file a report for that. Here, step back and let me open the door." The guard, oblivious to the chaos around them, led Eliyahu through a grisly battlefield. Angels leaping through the walls on all sides hacked demons to pieces. Eliyahu stared in amazement as about 50 demons shot out of one guard and jumped an angel, completely covering him. The angel spread his arms, and a flash of light and fire exploded from him, igniting the demons and blasting them in all directions. One burning demon streaked past Eliyahu, shrieking, as another angel lopped off its head and gave Eliyahu a gleeful smile and a thumbs up. He looked from angel to angel. All seemed to be having the time of their lives as they laid waste to this demon horde. They reached the far side of the room, and another door buzzed. The guard opened it and led him into a hallway. Eliyahu looked back, craning his neck to catch another glimpse of the chaos. "This way, watch your step," the guard said, tugging Eliyahu's sleeve. "Just down here." The hallway was long, with a single door at the end. The faint echoes of the slaughter behind them reverberated off the walls. Eliyahu had never witnessed anything like that. Was that what the Great War was like, but on a much larger scale? The enemy seemed so weak compared to Father's angels. The guard stopped, opened the door, and led Eliyahu into the room. 3 chairs faced a large raised platform where a man in a black robe sat behind a desk. 2 of the 3 chairs were occupied, and the guard gestured to Eliyahu to take the empty middle seat. Eliyahu approached the 2 prisoners. Faces popped out all over their bodies to mock and jeer at him. He sat down and stared straight ahead. The faces crowded toward him, and he could feel their hot breath on his skin. He closed his eyes. The first prisoner was called to stand. He was accused of possession with intent to distribute, second offense, 20 years in prison, court date scheduled 2 months out, no bail. The second prisoner was accused of vandalism, arson, and drunken disorderly conduct, 25 years in prison, court date scheduled 2 months out, no bail. They called Eliyahu to stand. He closed his eyes and stood. "Father, help me," he thought. He looked up at the judge. A dark face emerged from behind his face, smiling ear to ear. A long black tongue licked jagged yellow teeth.
"Eliyahu, you are accused of..."
An angel stepped through the wall behind him and swung his sword across the judge's throat. The fallen one's head fell out of the judge's chest and onto his desk. The judge staggered, then cleared his throat. He said thoughtfully, then looked down and shuffled his papers. "Eliyahu, The angel picked up the head, turned around, and walked back through the wall, not seeming to notice Eliyahu or his demon-filled companions. "Human trafficking! Wow! I haven't seen one of these before, not in this town." He looked at Eliyahu scrutinizingly. "Did you abduct a young woman?" "No, sir," Eliyahu said. "It's my sister. It's a misunderstanding. They have her locked up in a psychiatric hospital." "Okay, this seems all very strange. Don't worry, we'll get this sorted. Do you need a lawyer? If so, get a form from one of the guards and fill it out as soon as possible. You turned yourself in?" "Yes, sir," Eliyahu nodded. "Okay, good lad. I'm going to let you out without bail. Just make sure you show up to your court date, okay?" Eliyahu nodded again, thanked the judge, and was escorted out of the police station. As he walked out, the oppressive air lifted, and no traces of angels or demons remained anywhere.
Chapter 10. The Friend. Bracha sat watching the door.
"You're free!" she exclaimed as Eliyahu stepped out of the police station onto the busy sidewalk. "I skipped class today. Father said I should wait here for you." Eliyahu grinned. "I'm free for now. I have to see the judge again in 2 months. Thanks for waiting." He bent down and greeted Chivalry, scratching behind his ears. Bracha nodded slowly. 2 months. That's a long time to wait. Well, I have the whole day off. What do you want to do?" As they walked, Eliyahu told Bracha about the events in the police station, the battle between the angels and demons, and how an angel had stepped out and unknowingly saved him from the judge's sentence. Bracha listened with amazement, interrupting to ask questions. "So you can blink and see into other dimensions?" she asked. "Well, it used to take more concentration, but now I can shift easily, like turning the page of a book. I've counted 7 realms, each one looking a little different. There's life there, plants, animals of all sorts. Chivalry here came from a different realm, on a different planet, too." Bracha stared wide-eyed at Chivalry. "Chivalry!" she exclaimed. "You're an alien?" Bracha pointed as they walked past the park where Hope had been abducted. "Let's go sit by the fountain," she said. Eliyahu's stomach clenched. He avoided even looking at the park whenever he passed it. Flashbacks of the blue lights, the dark figures, and Hope's scream filled him with rage, regret, and resentment. Why did Father take her away from him? He knew he needed to grow, to learn to hear Father, to trust him, to see himself as Father saw him, to love Hope the way Father did. But couldn't he have learned those things with Hope by his side? "Go to the park," Father whispered. Eliyahu winced. "Father, why?" No response. He turned to Bracha and hesitated, then said, "Sure, the fountain sounds nice." They sat on a bench facing the fountain, surrounded by a large circular pool. A fat green baby with wings stood on a pedestal in the center, pouring water from a vessel while streams of water shot out in a circle around it. "Is that what cherubim really look like?" Bracha asked. Eliyahu glanced at the statue and grimaced. "No," he replied sarcastically. He looked to his right and saw the patch of dirt mixed with ashes where their fire had been over 8 weeks ago. "Why did you take her?" he thought. "You know I didn't take her," Father said. "But you let it happen. You could have stopped it." Eliyahu looked down at his hands.
I know it hurts. It hurts me too.
Father's voice was sad but reassuring. Why did it hurt Father? She's still with you. I'm the one alone. And I don't even know if I'll ever get her back, Eliyahu thought. Do you remember when I gave you your love for each other? Do you remember how I laughed when you embraced, and how my joy filled the throne room? Eliyahu nodded silently, and Father continued. Your love for each other is one of my most prized creations. Do you think I'd let it be destroyed? A tear dripped from Eliyahu's cheek, and Bracha put her hand on his shoulder. Hey, are you okay? You've been quiet. Eliyahu took a deep breath and continued to stare at his hands. This is the spot where they took Hope, he said. Bracha put her hand over her mouth. I'm so sorry, she whispered. You should have told me. Do you want to leave? Eliyahu hesitated. No, I'm fine. He furrowed his brow. Father would not let their love be destroyed. He would get Hope back. Father says this isn't the spot where everything ended. It's the start of something new, something better. He says I'll get Hope back, and when I do, it'll be 100 times better than it ever was. Bracha smiled at him through teary eyes and nodded slowly. I feel that too. The sun was dipping below the tree line, but the breeze was warm and fragrant. Flower beds bordered a path through a small garden in the center of the park. Eliyahu bent down and picked a flower. Hope would have liked it here, he said gloomily. Bracha poked his side. Don't say would have, say, I'll take Hope here when I get her back. And stop picking flowers, it's against the rules. Eliyahu nodded slightly. You're right, I'll take her here when I get her back. He smiled at Bracha. How's work been? Any news on Hope? Bracha pulled out her phone and checked the time. Not too bad, it's been quiet. My nurse friend has been out sick, so I haven't heard much about Hope, but it's getting late and I have to get ready for work. I'll see if I can get any updates tonight. Eliyahu placed the flower back, tucking it carefully among the others, then stepped back to look at it, nodding with satisfaction. Could you find out when I'd be able to see Hope? Now that the police aren't looking for me, maybe they'd let me. Bracha looked uncertain. I guess I could try to find out. They don't really tell cleaning staff that kind of thing, but I'll see if I can find someone to ask. She gave him an encouraging smile, bid him farewell, then she and Chivalry headed down the garden path toward the street. Eliyahu arrived back at the beach just as the moon was rising over the ocean. His beach chair and umbrella were right where Bracha had left them, tucked under a shrub next to the entrance to his camp. He took his chair, unfolded it, and set it by the waves. He sat and reclined and looked up at the stars. The day had gone better than expected. The experience with the angels was something he'd never forget. It gave him hope. Seeing Father take action like that, even if not to directly get Hope back, gave him faith that Father could do something if he wanted. Father said he'd get Hope back, but he didn't say when. He could spend 1,000 years on Earth before he got her back. Father didn't seem to like being asked about timing. Be patient, trust me, was all he'd ever say about that. Eliyahu sighed, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. It was a long day, and he was exhausted. Father stood before him. He knew it was Father. It felt like Father, but it did not look like him. The appearance made him uneasy. Hesitantly, Eliyahu studied him. The image before him was the image of a man. The man, or Father, opened his arms and smiled. A grassy field swirled around them, and a bright blue sky filled with puffy clouds illuminated the scene. Eliyahu, walk with me, the man said. Eliyahu looked around. He could feel the sun and the breeze on his face. He could hear the long grass swaying as the wind carried its sweet scent. Was this a dream? A vision? It felt so real. He turned toward the man. Who are you? He asked. You know who I am, the man replied. Eliyahu looked at him intently. You feel like Father, but I've never seen you like this. The man's eyes searched him. They were soft, gentle, but soul-piercing, as if they could see everything he'd ever done, thought, or would do or think. They were welcoming and kind,
They were wise, like they knew him better than he knew himself. But they loved him, and they wanted him to say a name. Without hesitation, Eliyahu said, "You're Jesus." Jesus smiled and nodded. "I am." Eliyahu looked down. He didn't know what to make of this.
"Why does this bother you?" Jesus said gently.
"I don't know," Eliyahu responded. Jesus waited for a moment, then answered for him. "You feel this is a side of me not meant for you." Eliyahu realized that was the truth. This version of Father was meant for man, not for him. It represented the rejection of his race. Jesus put his hand on Eliyahu's shoulder. "I was meant for you, and you for me." Eliyahu bit his lip. The emotions flowing from Father were too strong to bear, permeating every part of him. Eliyahu forced out the words that had been caught in the back of his mind since they arrived on this planet. "How can I be human?" he asked. Jesus smiled. "I'll show you." The grassy field swirled and faded, and a new scene appeared. They stood in Father's throne room. The emerald rainbow gleamed, casting rays of light on the glassy floor. Bright white light pulsed slowly as Father rested on his throne. Before them stood 3 fallen ones facing the throne. Father was addressing them.
Semyaza, Azazel, Asael, you have rebelled against me and set your hearts toward evil. You knowingly joined your fallen brethren in the rebellion against my kingdom.
Eliyahu turned toward Jesus. "What is this?" he whispered. "Or when is this?" Jesus looked at him solemnly and answered, "This is shortly after the Great War and before we created man." Semyaza stepped forward and addressed the throne.
We believe our punishment is unjust. You created us with free will, the ability to make our own choices. We could follow you, or we could forge our own path. Yet you created us. You gave us ambition and independence.
Semyaza lifted his arms at his side, then continued.
A desire to grow beyond what we were. Our rebellion was not a slight against you, O Father, but a natural result of who you made us to be. You could say we honored you by fulfilling what you created us for.
Father's light slowly pulsed as he spoke.
Semyaza, you speak truly that you were given a choice, as has all my creation. But you were not created for evil, nor do you honor me by choosing it. Many of your brothers and sisters chose what was right, to love, honor, and serve me, and not a single celestial turned against me. Azazel stepped forward and stood beside Semyaza.
My brother speaks truth, and regarding the celestials, they are mindless puppets.
He glanced back and looked at Eliyahu and smiled.
They live carefree lives, surrounded by luxury. You have blessed them beyond measure. Take that away, and you'll see who they truly are. Every last one will turn on you.
Eliyahu looked at Jesus, his eyes wide with amazement as he was starting to put the pieces together. Father addressed the 3 fallen ones.
I will test my sons and daughters.
Though some may fall, many will flourish. I'll reform creation and set them over it. They'll each be given the choice to follow me or to turn against me. They'll have free will, and those loyal to me will reap great reward. Father's voice, the throne room, and the 3 fallen ones faded, and the words echoed in Eliyahu's mind. A dense forest of tall pine trees encompassed them. Golden light filtered through the branches and illuminated a small stream banked with a mossy slope where Jesus sat. Eliyahu walked forward and sat beside him. There had been so many clues, but he never wanted to believe it. He was human. What about that made him upset? When he first heard that Father was creating a new race of men, he felt like Father was abandoning them, that he gave up on them and turned his affection toward a new creation.
He had felt like an outcast for so long that it became part of who he was. Letting that go was hard. "I'm a rebel, aren't I?" Jesus looked at him, his eyes sorrowful.
I know you, from outside time.
Jesus put his arm around Eliyahu's shoulders. "I have memories spanning eons of you and I together, memories full of joy and laughter. You are one of my oldest, dearest friends." Jesus pulled Eliyahu closer as he began to sob. Eliyahu rolled over on his mat and rested his cheek against the rough surface. He inhaled through his nose, searching for a scent that had long faded. If he closed his eyes, he could still see her smile, but he knew there were things he was forgetting. He remembered what it felt like to wrap himself in her light, the warmth, the comfort, the peace, but he could not recall her voice or her laugh. He remembered times when she sat drawing in her scroll and asked him to join her. Often he would decline, choosing instead to walk and survey the area. Regret tore through his heart. She was the most precious gift he would ever receive, and he had turned down time with her to walk and feel sorry for himself. What a fool he had been. Was she thinking of those times now? If she pictured him, what did she see? Did she see him happy and well-adjusted, making new friends, perhaps occasionally thinking of her fondly? He knew Father was working on him, making him better, more like him. But what was going on with Hope? Was she growing too? Father would not tell him. Father would only talk to him about him. He knew he needed to learn to trust Father with her safety. Father did love her more than he did, after all. The hardest part was not knowing. "If you knew, you wouldn't need to trust me," Father whispered. I know, Eliyahu moaned, then peered out the small entrance of his den. He didn't want to get up, but Braca was expected shortly. He crawled forward out through the small opening, stood, and stretched. "Good morning, Father," he yawned.
Who are you, Eliyahu?
He felt Father's love rest on him. Eliyahu smiled.
This concludes Part 1 of Starstruck. Thank you for listening. Starstruck, Part 1. Chapter 1. The Throne. Eliyahu stood gazing at his father's throne. The sound of arguing and shouts of confusion surrounded him, but his eyes remained locked, fixed on the glory and majesty of that heavenly seat. Even in their current situation, he could not grasp how anyone could do any differently. The radiant throne gleamed like precious jewels beneath a shimmering emerald rainbow, and the air around him vibrated with the holy light that pulsed through this sacred space. A war had just ended, a war that decimated all of creation. Stars had exploded, planets left to wander at the vastness of space. The war swept through the heavens like a cleansing fire, leaving behind piles of shattered light and ruins of a once perfect order. Gravitational fields trembled. Nebulae crawled through the void, their gaseous bodies trailing memories of what once was. Rings of debris, asteroids, fragments of angelic armor floated aimlessly through space. All of it was over now, but the damage was everywhere. The boundaries that fenced in the ordered realms had been cracked, and nothing felt whole. Eliyahu remembered the first wave of wounded. It was chaos, a constant stream of injuries coming in at a pace faster than their little team of medics could handle. Learning to heal was something they never thought would be necessary. Being a celestial, he did not engage in combat. He was not strong enough, but could still help his brothers and sisters. The war went on for years, but was finally over. The enemy had been defeated, but at what cost? A third of their number had rebelled, many he had known, many he had considered friends. The loss was severe. What would become of them? The council had gathered to petition their father. The fate of the fallen had yet to be made known. Some wanted judgment, some forgiveness. Nothing like this had ever happened. There was no precedent. One of the elders shouted for silence, but no one seemed to notice. They needed to hear from their father. They needed direction. Then, in an instant, all was silent. A blinding light surrounded them, and the weight fell upon them.
Every angel, celestial being, and heavenly creature fell to their knees, and the presence of their Father rested on his throne. A feeling of trepidation washed over the room. Then he spoke.